the Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below, and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10% off. Hello and welcome to the Hurling Show. As ever, myself, Shane Stapleton and Michael Verney alongside me there, throwing the ball in, getting ready for more massive hurling action this weekend. Do you know what, Michael? No place better to start than a comment that's coming in here from Kev Q. Lads, this crack of only 500 allowed to attend the qualifier games this weekend has to be set right quickly today. They could move Waterford-Galway to Tramore Beach. There'll be 15,000 there. So, I mean, we haven't got confirmation just yet, but there are reports of both games being 500,000 or 500 people each. One at Semple Stadium, which you could squeeze 50,000 into, and the Gaelic grounds wouldn't be far off it either.
Yeah, no, it's just a bit mad, Shane. It's mad that we're still in this situation where we're talking about only 500 going to a game, 250 from each side, and obviously limited access for anybody. Like, they're literally golden tickets if people wanted to get into a game. It's nigh on impossible to get one with 500, and it is so safe to fit, 5,000-6,000 even at the moment. Like, that's like ultra safe to fit them in these really, really large stadiums. It's a bit mind-boggling at this stage. But and the thing is as well, they're such a prized commodity because like the games this weekend are just such high stakes. Last weekend was obviously the first real weekend of knockout hurling, but like a couple of big guns are going to fall this weekend.
Yeah, it's such a brilliant weekend. Last weekend was breakneck hurling. There was so much on. This weekend, Waterford-Galway at Semple, Clare Cork at the Gaelic grounds. All these games are on Saturday, by the way. Then there's Christy Ring Cup semi-finals, and the same, the Nicky Rackard and the Laurie Maher. And there's a Division 1 relegation playoff. It's been paid at this point now at the end of their championship seasons. Laois against Westmeath. That is high-stakes stuff. Shane Power in with a comment. The Saint against the Biffo, qualifier edition. Big smiley face. He's correct and right. Hey, we're also going to do a power rankings in terms of like the top 11 teams. A lot of sand has shifted. A lot of the landscape has moved since last we did this. We're also going to look at the top 10 hurlers in the country.
That's going to be carnage.
And get your comments in. Yeah, get your comments in. So yeah, we talked about the amount of spectators that'll be at the game, and that's obviously frustrating. But I'll tell you what, for Cork and Galway, they've only had one game each coming into this stage of the season, so it's quite difficult to analyse them. Cork lost to Limerick. I thought they did quite well. Galway were poor as Dublin beat them 118 to 114. Waterford have played 3 times. Clare have played twice. The other way around. Clare have played 3 times. Waterford twice. So it's actually a little bit easier to analyse them because you have a bit more to go on.
100%. Yeah, like you'd have to say that out of the 4 teams, Clare are easily the most informed team in this championship. And we've seen with a good few teams already, didn't think there would be as much of a rise or a gap between league and championship form based on their proximity. But there has been, like, Waterford has shown very, very little so far. Still think there's a bit of a kick in them, but Clare are definitely the ones that are coming into this weekend in the best form. You have a fair idea, what you're going to get from Clare at this stage. You definitely couldn't say the same for Galway. You definitely couldn't say the same for Waterford. Cork to a much lesser extent. We're only going on that Limerick game. And I suppose, listen, if you're talking about form being franked, did a lot of wides, missed a penalty saved that evening against Limerick. There are a couple of probably borderline tackles that could have maybe resulted in 15 and 14 for even longer. So they're probably the ones that are coming into this weekend, amongst that trio with Waterford and Galway of teams that we haven't seen too much of, with the most optimism. Confidence will be relatively high, but still it's a fair gap going back to when they've last played. 3 weeks is nearly too long a gap now at this stage, and the same applies for Galway.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking at the Waterford team from the All-Ireland final last year. I have the match programme here, and if you go through the team, I haven't actually totted this up, so I'm going to do it on the fly here. we saw that Stephen O'Keefe stepped away for the year and Billy Nolan played the first day, but Sean O'Brien was in goals the last day. Now, in terms of the full back line, Conor Prunty and Ian Kenny, Prunty's obviously back from injury, he remains there. In the half back line, well, of the three that played there in the final last year was Calum Lyons, Tyke de Burka, who went off with a cruciate, and Kevin Moran. Only Calum Lyons remains in that position. Now, Irda Daly came in the final and he was very good. Now, there's been plenty of moving and switching other than that. Now, Neil Montgomery and Patrick Hearn, on the team sheet I'm looking at here, I watched it on the stream. It can be hard to tell the positions at times, but Montgomery and Patrick Hearn are down as midfield on the match report I'm looking at, whereas it was Jamie Barron and Kieran Bennett in the All-Ireland last year. Jack Fagan, Neil Montgomery, according to this match programme, and Stephen Bennett in the half-forward line. But last week, Jack Fagan, Jack Prendergast, Kevin Moore. Again, there's moving around, but there's plenty of change. Desi Hutchinson remains, Ozzie Gleeson remains, and Stephen Bennett, he's in as corner forward in this match report. He moves around the pitch anyway. But there's so much change in that Waterford team. Jamie Barron came on the last day against Laois, and they were pushed to the pin of their collar there, eventually winning 323 to 221. They were behind going into the second half water break. So, do we look at it that Waterford it was a game they had to get through? Sometimes when you're up against a team that you're supposed to beat and supposed to beat handily enough, it's kind of, you labour through that game somewhat. You have to give credit to Laois for the way they played. But Waterford, right, where are they at? Do we look at the fact that they came back against Clare when they finally brought Calum Lyons out from full back, Mark and Tony Kelly? And do we say, this team did so well last year that we have to give them the benefit of the doubt? They can rise it again.
A couple of things on what you said there. Liam Cattell admitted afterwards that he didn't want to bring Jamie Barron on. I didn't feel that he was even ready to be brought on, and they had to take a risk by bringing him on, but that the game was in the melting pot, and they had to get over the line. Another thing you said there, you could beat a team maybe by 15 or 20, and maybe you don't learn, it's all about getting the result or whatever. But the fact that, the game went right down the stretch, it was right, it was still up for decision nearly in injury time, is definitely a lot more uncomfortable than I'm sure they would have liked it to be. With two championship performances, reasonably, flat on both occasions, particularly the first day against Clare. So, you can't just flick a button and turn it on. And obviously, we'd say Austin Gleeson was, in the backs the first day, in the forwards the next day. There's a lot of moving around, like a new keeper coming in with Sean O'Brien. That's a big one as well. Having already lost Stephen O'Keefe, and then Billy Nolan is gone, and then Tyke de Burka obviously gone from the heart of their defence. Probably only in his absence that you realise just how good he is and just how much of a driving force he is for them. But there definitely are some doubts about their form coming into this game. They're fairly big underdogs coming into the game against Galway at the weekend. And I know, going back to the 2009 meeting with Galway and the 2011 meeting with Galway, they were fairly big underdogs going into those two as well. They ended up winning on both occasions. I suppose this is a repeat of the 2017 All-Ireland final, and they haven't met in championship since. But you just don't know exactly where they are. And Liam Cattell did cut a frustrated figure after the game the last day, because I think he's not even sure exactly where they are. And he thought they were flying, and I kind of thought they were flying at the end of the league. And all of a sudden now they're coming into the biggest game of the season, and there's big, big question marks over their form and the form of some of their key men in particular.
Yeah, well, if you go through the league performances this year, started out the first day, conceded 5-22 against Cork, and only got a load of scores in garbage time just to put some respectability on the scoreline. Second day out, changed their team massively for the game against Westmeath and won by 3 points, so can't really read much into that. Beat a Limerick team that got a red card midway through the first half. It was 10 points to 5, I think, to Limerick at that stage. The red card obviously changed the game. The next day out against Galway, they were well ahead in that game, surely 8 or 9 points, if not more, and ended up conceding 4-28 and losing by 7 points. So that's a bit of a shocker. And then talk about Jekyll and Hyde stuff. Losing to Tipperary going into half-time of that league game in Walsh Park, and they ended up scoring 2-29 and blitzing Tipperary in that second half. Then you go into the Clare game, missing all those players. Prunty, Tyke de Burka's gone for the season, so for 2021 there's probably no point in continuing to bring him up. Jamie Barron. You know, like, how do you get a read on this team? But like, you can't read too much into Galway either. Their team is all over the place. You hear of like a players meeting after the last game of Ranker about certain players being brought on, like the forwards are playing and our backs are playing in the forwards, and like, if you were to just look at it from the outside, Adrian Toohey was a corner back in 2017.
And a very, very good one.
Yeah, and then he's playing, we talked about last year, the likes of Sean Loftus playing corner back. Now, he was midfield the last day and didn't go well at all against Dublin. But Joseph Cooney playing full forward against Dublin, obviously they were thinking we'll get some change out of Owen O'Donnell, or he won't like it, or it'll force Dublin to rejig things to address that. Dahi Burke going centre and Grode McInerney going full, and will that switch back around as well? So there's an awful lot of things there, and there's been talk this week also that there may be a positive COVID test in the Galway camp now.
Yeah, I've heard that same thing as well.
Yeah, I heard that in a few places now. So we know that it destroyed Dublin's chances in the Leinster final last week, and 3 of the 4 players who had to step out, there was 1 positive test, and in 3 close contacts. The close contacts have all been tested since and are negative, but probably still won't be allowed back training till the middle of next week, I'd imagine, leading into their All-Ireland quarter-final. But I don't think we want to necessarily name names without having that confirmation from the Galway camp about the case. So it is just speculation.
But just on that, Shane, if you look at how much was taken away from Dublin by the focal point of their attack in particular, Ronan Hayes missing, like, just massive, very hard to plan without him. Very hard to cope with a loss like that and take so much from them. Like, if just say, if it's a fullback, just say if it's a fullback that's missing, you're missing someone at the heart of the defence. If it's a goalkeeper that's missing, you're missing obviously the last line of defence and the one that communicates with everyone. And like, outside of Éanna Murphy, I don't think anybody else played any league this year at all. So you could have a very inexperienced keeper in.
Like Dara Fahy, he'd be there.
So. And if you're missing, I suppose at least if they're missing one free taker, at least if they're missing Canning, they'd have Nyland to come in and vice versa. But it will definitely hit your options a lot, and the potential of an inexperienced player coming in. So this is where the panel is really going to come into it. But as Brian Cody said the other day, the big thing about COVID is whatever about the positive case, it's all the close contacts and the potential for close contacts that can really, I think cripple was the word he used, and it really can cripple you. Like, there was a positive test in the Dublin camp, obviously, but it was probably the 3 close contacts that really hammered home the blow, if you know what I mean, because all of a sudden they're missing 4 guys that are definitely going to probably be on the field at some stage together in the game. So not going to be simple for Galway to deal with that.
Yeah, because imagine if you took 2/3 of the full back line out of Galway or Waterford going into this game. And this is what Waterford have been up to, or have been up against this year. They lost, like, was it only 7 of the All-Ireland team played in the first
8,
day?
I think, 8.
Yeah, against Clare. And did they look like the team that got to an All-Ireland final last year? Did they have the energy? Did they have the verve? What did they have? Did they just look like the Waterford team that, after getting to the All-Ireland final in 2017, up until, I suppose, last year, they weren't really at the races at all? It just looked like just a tepid Waterford team that first day out. And like Liam Cahill, he doesn't spare it. He doesn't put too much salt on it. He hates it whole. He did kind of question the players, not in a saying they put up the white flag or anything like that, but that's very much not good enough. And you always hear this thing about Waterford players. There are certain type of characters, and you have to find the right balance with them. Now, whatever about that, but Cahill and his experiences with Tipperary when he was with the minors and he was with the under-21s, and he had all that success, he says, I'm not interested in having people and their mammies and daddies getting onto me. I don't want to make soft hurlers for Tipperary to go on up the line. I'm not sending them up the line to Michael Ryan, who was manager at the time. So I wonder if his approach, which would be no arm around the shoulder and get out there and do it. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's somewhere between that when you're actually in the camp and he's dealing with you. But like, how will that work? How will they respond? And for Shane O'Neill, how will the players respond to him?
Well,
last year,
just on that, Shane, like the Cattle one is interesting. Waterford are very similar to Wexford in the respect that like if they don't have the high energy that their game plan requires, they are under pressure, and they haven't had that high energy in the first couple of games. And like if you're looking at the Laois game last weekend, didn't really have that high energy that they needed. All of a sudden, then you're hoping that it's going to be there a week later. I definitely would have big doubts about whether it's going to be there a week later. From Shane O'Neill's point of view, I know from chatting to a couple of people, a couple of Galway folk, big hurling supporters, that there would be that his management would be coming into some question, and that after the last game, and that some people are saying that the players seem to be nearly almost moving around themselves a lot and making switches on the pitch themselves a lot. Whether that's 100% true or not, I'm not sure, but that's the talk. And listen, you're always going to have that talk, no more than the players meeting that you hear of after a big defeat. You're always going to have that, but it's definitely two managers under a bit of pressure now at the moment, particularly I would say O'Neill, because of the talent that he's dealing with in Galway. Like we're talking about Galway as the standout second best team in the country before the championship, and all of a sudden they've thrown in a clangor of performance that, in fairness, as I was chatting to Cyril Farrell recently, and in fairness he said this team hasn't really done that, but they were synonymous for it, over previous decades. And he was just saying about even the hurt that the likes of elder statesmen like Joe Canning, David Burke, and these guys, the hurt that they'll bring to it. They won't want to go out like this. And you're talking about it's not just going out of the championship. It's potentially last chance saloon for a lot of those greats. David Burke is an All-Ireland winning captain. I think he's a 4-time All-Star. Canning, one of the best hurlers we've ever seen. Like, their chances of winning a second Liam McCarthy aren't exactly overflowing. So they have no option only to bounce back this weekend. But there is that doubt. And with things that are going on potentially in the camp, it raises even more doubt. So you've got two teams coming into the weekend with nothing, only really doubts hanging over them. And someone's going to have to react in a really, really positive way, because the game is there to be won. Someone's going to have to win. Someone's going to have to go through. So I think that makes it really, really intriguing. Like, this is the thing about hurling. You've no idea what you're going to see when you tune into that game. You really don't. You could see a Galway side. You could see this massive backlash, and you could see all the great forwards that we know they have. Whelan, Concannon, Cathal Mannion, Joe Canning, and they could put up an absolutely monster performance, a huge scoreline, or they could put up a tepid performance like they did against Dublin the last day, and so probably something similar with Waterford. I think that's what makes it so intriguing.
Yeah, when I've spoken to Galway people, they're kind of fearful that, look, after a performance that bad, we're not really a team that rouses itself to go again. Whether that's true or not, but this is just what you'd hear from Galway folk. And let us know what you think.
When they've been winning, they're generally like whole way through 17 league championship, real positive, high graph. 18, even though they underperformed in the final, they've been winning games the whole way throughout the league and championship. So yeah, they're not exactly ones to have a big dip and then a big high. So it's usually the graph says steady, or it's going on an upward curve. So I think that's definitely a fair point.
And I'd be curious to hear from people if they think that this is maybe the last chance for this Galway team to win in All-Ireland with this group of players. Or let's say, Canning is 32, he'll be turning 33 soon enough. Davy Burke's 31, he'll be 32 next year. Those players, they may be around for a couple of years yet. But, in terms of and this is the same with Tipperary, you don't know if they'll be the players that win you the All-Ireland, or if they'll be the guys who would be the finishers to come on and help, or if you're accommodating slightly older players. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let Michael know as well. Get any questions in.
Just on that chain, with the amount of underage success that they've had, the conveyor belts should be overflowing in Galway. The first crop of minors will be, 21, 22 next year. So it's not as if there's a lack of talent coming through. And if Galway are beaten this weekend, I'm sure there'll be a fair bit of call for change in both personnel, potentially management personnel, and personnel on the pitch.
Yeah, but Galway have been winning underage titles for years. And I mean, a lot of that was directly into All-Ireland semi-finals. And similarly, too, in the club level, people talk about, look at the record of Galway teams. Yeah, you didn't have to play a province, so you just time yourselves nicely, while the rest of us kill ourselves in Leinster and Munster and Ulster. But another comment in here, as you mentioned, the underage success. Luke Toomey, Cork under-20s beat Tip without Aaron Connolly and Shane Barrett. Unreal second-half comeback. Should drive on their seniors. The work rate the under-20s showed. The fact that they won that third quarter 2-5 to a point. They had been 7 points down going into half-time and just took that game over. Very, very impressive. Now, we'll talk about Cork in a few minutes, but...
bit of deja vu for your boys again in the third quarter.
You couldn't wait to bring that up, could you?
Well, you brought the game up. I just piggybacked in on top
Luke Toomey brought the game up in his comment in. Another point about Waterford and what they're trying to do. So we talked about putting Austin Gleeson full forward last year and obviously moved to the half forward at times. Then he moved back to wing back against Clare and scored 4 points from play and another one from a free. He was their best player, not even up for debate. Then the last day he's moved back into full forward, scores a couple of points. Waterford had 11 different scores actually, which is one positive to talk about. Shane Bennett went in at wing back. Hard to know if that worked. I mean, he is a very good player. When he played against Tip in the league in full forward, can't say I was blown away with him, on his return to the panel this year. I do think he's a very good player, but I don't know. I mean, rejigging on the fly, sometimes it just clicks. And, they look at what's happening with Caleb Lyons and his pace moving forward with the ball. Maybe Yeardle Daly can sit, assuming he plays centre-back. And you can have both Shane Bennett and Caleb Lyons sprinting forward from wing-back. So I kind of see, that's my interpretation of it, and I can kind of see some merit in it.
Yeah, going to be interesting because if Shane Bennett's playing wing-back, I think Galway, I know he has played wing-back before and was wing-back in the All-Ireland minor winning team, but Galway will go after him with an out-and-out attacker. They will, try and really, challenge.
And high puckouts, maybe.
Yeah, and high puckouts as well. So, I think they'll really go after him and go after his defensive skills. So that's going to be an interesting one. We know his brilliance, but from a manager's point of view, sometimes he can try to nearly be too smart with the ball and try to be a little bit too clever and do kind of flashy things where when they come off, it's brilliant, but when they don't come off, I can remember him getting caught in possession against Laois and literally got the curly finger about 20 seconds later, I'd say, just because, the game is gone past the hour mark. You're looking for everything to be as solid as possible. And you maybe have a player trying things when the occasion is just not to try them. If you're up by 10 or 15 points, maybe you could try them. So it'd be interesting to see whether he stays there at the weekend. And I think if he does, that I think that Galway will go after him, maybe with someone like maybe a Conor Whelan maybe going out to the wing, or even a Brian Kincannon going out there as well, and really trying to put him on the back foot and challenge his defensive duties. Because how much has he played in the backs? He's played in the backs maybe 2 weeks of the whole season, so they'd be only right to go after him.
Maybe he played there for Ballysaggart in the past couple of years. Obviously we wouldn't have seen that, but you don't know how much. But at the same time, sometimes a change is as good as a rest. There can be very few sports in the world where you can have a lad in the backs one day and the forwards the next day. Lad I live with, he says, it's like putting Harry Kane right back all of a sudden for Spurs 1 week after having him centre forward in the other week. It just doesn't really happen in other sports, does it?
Yeah, no, there was a great story when we were in St Brendan's. I was just gone out of school, I think, but the boys were playing.
After you did the Leaving Cert 3 times?
7 of the best in St Brendan's. Picture up on the wall, framed and all. But there was the boys were playing soccer one day, and Mr. Cleary was the manager of the team and did a really good striker. Bosa was his name, and they said Mr. Cleary tried to justify playing Bosa right back. He's like, Bosa, you're the best striker we have in this school, so we're going to play you right back because you know a striker's instincts. And it's just like that's kind of hurling is kind of like that. You can just you can go from centre back to centre forward, corner back to corner forward nearly at times as well. So going to be interesting to see does Gleeson stay full forward. Like Gleeson is, in fairness to him, and from last year's All-Ireland final probably onwards, he's stood up in in every game for Waterford. He stood up in the game against Cork earlier on in the year. Now, in fairness, he wasn't brilliant against Limerick when he was playing kind of centre back / sweeper, but generally he has stood up in the games when he's been needed the most. He stood up against Clare, and he stood up the last day. Maybe his scores didn't go over the bar against Laois as he would like, but he has stood up when it has been needed most, and he's been a beacon of light when a lot of other guys are really, really struggling.
I was laughed out of the place when I tried to get Austin Gleeson into the top 10 hurlers when we did it a month or so ago. I'm going to be pushing hard to get him in here again. Chris Neville says TJ Reid number 1. So that's going to be a big talking point. The last time out we had Tony Kelly number 1, TJ Reid number 2, Seamus Callan 3. I think you have the list there, do you?
Yeah, have it here in front of me.
Yeah, just call out the 10, and then we're going to be talking that through later on in the show. So you might as well get your comments in now, and not only let us know where you think someone should be or why Callanan should be ahead of TJ Reid or Horgan or whatever. Let us know why you think it. That would be very important to help us kind of decide.
Yeah, I think the justification for why you have somebody there is probably nearly the most important thing. So the top 10 we had, it's probably a month ago at this stage: Tony Kelly, TJ Reid, Seamus Callanan, Dahi Burke, Sean Finn, Joe Canning, Patrick Horgan, Keane Lynch, Garrod Hegarty, and Pádraig Mannion. So I expect a lot of movement there. There's definitely a few guys going to drop a few, and there's definitely a few guys going to go up a few. And I think a few players that aren't in the equation at the moment will probably come into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about the Galway forward line? The talent they have is, brilliant. Joe Canning, when he's fit and flying, obviously we saw flashes of that in the league against Waterford. He was absolutely brilliant that day. You could argue that the performance against Dublin was the worst we've ever seen from, and this is the thing that we've talked about with a lot of players like Patrick Horgan. He didn't play well against Limerick. I think Seamus Callanan, the fact that he hasn't had a pre-season, it was pretty evident in the game against Limerick. Towards the end of the game, he was very much struggling with the pace, so not having that pre-season. We definitely mentioned one other older player who had a tough time out.
I think you just mentioned that TJ maybe hasn't been lighting it up as much as maybe other seasons.
Yeah, TJ got a point from play the last day. Obviously nailed all his frees, and he does do a lot of good approach work. But even like his movement seems to be a bit more static on the inside line. He's still people obviously take a fit of the vapors and clutch their pearls when you say this about their star players, but he's different, and he's probably adjusting his game, and we don't see him do that thing of collect the ball on the 65 and solo up through the centre of a team anymore and blast it into the corner of the net or assist the goal. He's different now. He's collecting the ball, turning and assessing the options and firing it to the right man. It's just a different type of game he's playing.
Yeah.
He's still certainly in the top 5 hurlers in Ireland, I think, when we do this top 10 hurlers. But just to jump back to Galway then, Canning, he was, missed 10 chances in the first half against Dublin. A lot of people talked about the arrogance of this team, that they were going for so many goals early on in the game. Now, whatever of that, they misfired big time. But the forward options that they have, Cathal Mannion, there's some workhorses in there too, but Cathal Mannion, Joe Canning, Brian Kincannon, Conor Whelan, there's a quartet of scorers. But where do you play them? Now, just back to Canning last year in the All-Ireland semi-final against Limerick, didn't work out for him that day, not when he was in the half forward line, nor when he went into the full forward line. The Dublin game last time out, arguably his least impressive performance in a Galway jersey. So where do they play him to get the most out of him? Do you put Kincannon inside or out? Kincannon didn't, I can't remember him feeling the weight of the ball in that game against Dublin. Conor Whelan scored 1-2. He was brilliant. That's Conor Whelan for you. Cathal Mannion, relatively quiet also. Who are you looking to play inside in this game and try and expose that full back line of Waterford, of assuming it was the same as the last day, Ian Kenny, Conor Prunty and Conor Gleeson?
You're definitely not going to be exposing Prunty too much anyway, I can tell you that. So it'd be interesting to see what they do there, and if they play. Well,
if you put Whelan on him, I'm sure of all those players, or Kincannon, certainly Whelan, I think Whelan number one. You don't, as a big 6 foot, he's got to be 6'3". You don't really want a bundle of fire like that turning at you with the ball.
No, and I suppose what you're saying there is you probably don't want Joe Canning matching up with him realistically in the full forward line if that's where he's going to be. You want someone who's going to pose a completely different challenge. Whelan is kind of the perfect player in that respect, because he could trouble any big strong defender for power, and he can also cause him awful trouble in regards to pace, and he's a free scoring forward as well. So I wouldn't be that surprised if Whelan was the one in on him. Whelan or Kincannon, and maybe potentially alternating as well, because Kincannon again would have probably even more pace and is probably even more elusive than Whelan. So that probably raises the question then of, Waterford aren't going to let, if Canning goes into the full forward line, they're not going to let Canning, be picked up by Ian Kenny. So Canning could potentially be out the field a bit more then. I don't know about that. I don't know about the midfield experiment. I don't expect him to be out there, but I probably think they might have him out in the game a bit more in the half forward line. But I'm not sure if this is the day to plonk him in on the edge of the square, because I think Prunty will deal quite well with him.
Yeah, because remember the All-Ireland final in 2017, Canning started off like a house on fire in the first 10 minutes, but Philip Mahoney was marking him that day and probably edged it for the rest of the game. I wonder, will they put a man marker on him, and who would it be? Would Conor Gleeson maybe come out, or just be told, mark him no matter where? But again, it probably brings up that the high ball option that they have, because Canning is a great hand. But I think if you're Galway, you're probably thinking, well, maybe play him centre forward and let Irla Daly have to double job in terms of sweeping behind him and protecting Prunty against the likes of Conor Whelan, but also having that issue of having Joe Canning in front of him.
Yeah, and I think, Shane, I don't think we'll see as much movement from the Galway forward line as we did against Dublin. Like some of it was movement for the sake of movement almost against Dublin, and it almost seemed to confuse them, and they weren't able to get into any sort of pattern at all. And I think, interestingly, like, I'd be putting Dottie Burke back full back anyway. When you're playing a game where everything is on the line, I think you have to go with what you know. He was very, very quiet at centre back, trying to slip into a position that he's played very little of at county level. I would definitely be putting him full back. I know Galway folk would be adamant that Pádraig Mannion's best position is wing back, but I would have no issue slipping him in at centre back against a Galway team that's going to be all pace and that's going to be trying to take them on for pace and put them on the back foot the whole time. So I'd have no issue putting him centre forward, and if he ended up having to track Stephen Bennett at different stages or whatever, that raises the question whether Gerard McInerney starts or not.
McInerney did well on Austin Gleeson in the All-Ireland semi-final in 2017. Now, some people said he destroyed him. I didn't think so. I think after,
he did as a tracker, though, didn't he, when they were able to play a sweeper, I suppose, at the back.
Like, after 45 minutes, my take on it was, this is 50-50 sort of battle between these two lads so far, and I'd slightly nudging it towards Gleeson. But then he forced a couple of shots. I think he got blocked down with maybe one. Then maybe he was knocked back once or twice, something like that. But my memory is just that for a finish, McInerney won that battle. But we could actually see Gleeson play full forward and matching up with Daithí Burke. That would be tasty.
Yeah, that'd be tasty. All right,
yeah. I want a piece of that now. I want a piece of that.
You can just see, like, Ozzy loves contact as well. Daithí Burke's not exactly afraid of contact, so that'd be fairly interesting clash. And I'm sure Ozzy would be the plan would be to try and take Daithí Burke away from the square and leave space inside for Desi Hutchinson. You mentioned Adrian Toohey. It'd be interesting to see where he comes into the equation.
Does he mark Caleb Lyons? Do they try and think, what Tipperary tried to do with Michael Breen against Kyle Hayes? Do we we'll pick someone to try and shut this attacking threat down?
Maybe, but geez, it is a bit hard to believe that, a guy who was as good as he was in 2017 as a cornerback has all of a sudden just been turned into a wing forward. He was playing wing back during the league this year and was very, very good as well. So I think Galway are far more likely to go back to what they know, and that maybe kind of winning formula from 2017 and even 2018. So you'd expect, and I would be very, very surprised if Daithí Burke is not number 3, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if Toohey slips into the back line somewhere, either at probably 2 or 5.
Yeah, so the goalkeeping battle is definitely going to be very interesting this weekend. A few comments coming in. Please keep them coming. We don't know everything about hurling, and many times we get in comments that make us think a little bit differently, and sometimes they can be brilliant. Chris Conlon with a fairly straight down the middle one here. Tip will beat whoever they play next. Couldn't agree more, Chris. Fingers crossed. Anyway, Shane Power, as a Daisha lad, I'm not sure which draw would have been better, getting Galway or Cork. What do you think? That's an interesting one. I mean, Waterford have had the edge on Cork a couple of times recently.
I think getting another team in Galway that there's question marks on them and question marks over their form.
Fair point.
I think there's less question marks about Cork, and I think Cork are a lot more dangerous at the moment. I think Galway have the potential to be very dangerous. Probably in an All-Ireland semi-final, but they're going to have to win they're going to have to win 3 big games to get there. It's a long road for them. It's a long road for anybody to get back to an All-Ireland final now at this stage.
Well, put it this way: to get to an All-Ireland final, Galway will have to win this weekend, next weekend, and the weekend after. Now, there are some players, young lads, they're grand. They'll stay playing every single week, and this is a consideration for the likes of Kevin Moore, John Conlon, Patrick Horgan. And even actually for the Waterford lads, they played last weekend also. So it might be four games in 21 days or whatever. So this is going to be 3 games in 14, 15 days for some of these players to get through. If you're an older player, considering the physical toll of going through one of these games, never mind getting yourself up for it, that's some challenge. So the fresher legs might count. I mean, if you go through that Waterford team, I've mentioned Kevin Moore in there, but other than that, it's a very young team. If those young lads, if Waterford can get a win, if Galway can get a win, like, I mean, I think Clare already have a few wins in the bank, so they're probably in a pretty good state emotionally anyway, heading into the rest of the season. Cork, I thought, did well against Limerick. But a win here for Waterford or Galway, they do become a bit of a dangerous animal. Just a couple more comments in here. Donald Farrell, imagine the number of young lads trying to copy and fail with Kyle Hayes' solo and tap this week, and the number of old lads berating them. Will you cut it out for F's sake? But didn't he do it 3 times? Did he do it 3 times, actually, smacking the ball off the ground and getting it back into his hand?
2, I think, and it was 2 in a row, basically. So he picked up the ball, solo, dropped the sidestep, had the second catch, banged it off the ground, went again, banged it off the ground again. Like that would slow down any other player. It would slow down any other player to do that, but he just has it absolutely perfected and it's in his stride. Just on something you said there, Shane, I think it's interesting. Just got a message from a young fella in Waterford, Sean Fanning is his name, a gas character by all accounts, and he regularly watches our game and always tunes in, and just wanted to pass on the message that he really enjoys listening to the show. And he was asking for our thoughts on Waterford-Galway, which we've given, but he had a very pertinent question. He said, if Waterford beat Galway, where does that elevate them in terms of winning the All-Ireland? And I think it's a really good question, because whoever wins this game and obviously it will depend somewhat on the nature of the victory. But if Waterford win by 5 or 6, like they're back again, they're back on the horse again, they have a serious chance. And you definitely would say the same for Galway. Probably Galway even more so. But whoever wins this game, the whole season could open up for them. They're going to be really, really hard beaten. And I think this is, like, the other game is very interesting too. But just for all the variables in this game, it's really interesting. You couldn't predict it. And I would think whoever wins will go on a run, and nobody will want to be playing them. And I think their tails will be up.
If Clare win, they're definitely against Dublin. That's my read on it, because they can't play Tipperary in the quarter-final. So I think Clare would fancy themselves to beat Dublin, but I think Dublin would also fancy them. A bit of a 50-50 game there. If Waterford win, they're against Tipperary, and then they'd have to, it would actually, depending on how things work out, it could be an open draw for the semi-finals, couldn't it? I mean, yeah. Dublin, if Dublin win, they can't play Kilkenny again. If the likes of Tipperary win, they can't go through and play Limerick again. So it's, there's a lot of balls up in the air at the moment, and we'll have to start trying to call this Waterford against Galway game.
Yeah,
it's really tough.
It's really difficult to call. Sarah Farrell kind of said, and I think this is there's a bit of trepidation in doing it, but they always say in horse racing, when a horse runs that bad, a jockey or a trainer just say that you have to put a line through it because it was just too bad to be true. And that's kind of what I would say about Galway against Dublin. It was from everything we've known about this team, probably, going back to Anthony Cunningham's time even, they haven't done that. They generally haven't done that. This was an absolute, clanger of a performance to throw in. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They have a second chance. They don't become a bad team overnight. They've been one of the, the big contenders every year, probably going back since 2015 even. And obviously champions in 17, All-Ireland finalists in 18, semi-finalists last year, pushed Limerick the closest. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And when you go back through, the 4 or 5, lethal forwards that we mentioned, I just think they probably have a bit more of an attacking threat than Waterford. But it's a very hesitant vote. But I just do think that was too bad to be true against Dublin, and I think Galway will bounce back.
Yeah, well, 114 against Dublin was the lowest championship score that anyone's produced this year.
You couldn't have predicted that. Sure, like you just couldn't. Like that, they were striking that in half an hour during league games.
Yeah, you see, Waterford, there's no you don't have Tadhg de Burca, their best player arguably. I mean, maybe Austin Gleeson and maybe Jamie Byrne, another guy who's obviously not fully right. So you're taking the number. I mean, Conor Prunty is only just back, so is he at 100%? The goalkeeper isn't there, right? So they've got good goalkeepers coming through. That's fine, but just Stephen O'Keefe has been there for, was there for 10 years. So you're taking the experienced goalkeeper. You have a fullback who's only back from injury. You've got a centre back who isn't there. Good young lad in there at the moment, but the experience of Tadhg de Burca, you can't ignore it. Jamie Byrne isn't fully right. Pádraig Mahoney wasn't there last year, so we can't really kind of make too much of a meal out of that because they did get to an All-Ireland final. But it's just having all those players out. I think it does give the edge to Galway. And Galway were stink against Dublin. There's no two ways about it. They probably that's 2 seasons in a row now where they've maybe overthought it on the sideline. They played the sweeper last year against Kilkenny in the Leinster final, and I was looking at it going, why do they need to be so afraid of Kilkenny that they're playing with a sweeper here? Just go mano a mano. They ended up with Joseph Cooney full back because he was man marking Joe Canning. And TJ Reid. I'm not saying he did a bad job. Obviously, Reid got the goal at the end, but he was excellent other than that. Then they have him full forward this year. Then they swapped Dahi and they swapped Grode McInerney. Then they've Joe Canning out of midfield at one stage. Then they've got Sean Loftus from corner back to midfield.
Adrian Toohey, yeah.
Adrian Toohey. So it's just moving it around so much. And who'd be a manager? That's fine. I get it. And Shane O'Neill has done great stuff with the Piercing, and they've had some positive stuff and had some good games here. But I'd be like you. I'd give them a very hesitant nod here, but not in a way where I'm screaming from the rooftops. So we'll just jump to a couple more comments and jump back in then if you want, Michael. But Jared Markham, lads, how come there's 18,000 allowed in Croke Park for the football? Well, there you go. Croke Park has been obviously has a bigger capacity, but a lot of what's going on in the country would make you wonder. Donald Farrell, take the numbers on the jerseys the Dublin fellas missed with COVID, apply them to Kilkenny or any other team. That's what you're missing. No disrespect to Dublin at all. No, I don't think you could. If you took, Owen O'Donnell went off injured after 3 minutes. If you took out Dahi Burke and Shane Cooney out of the full back line and took Conor Whelan out of full forward and took a couple of subs that came on, let's say Nyland and the likes of Aidan Hart couldn't come on the last day, then all of a sudden you're in a nice bit of bother there. Comment from Lionel Strongjaw. Would Limerick under 20s beaten Clare by 13 points? And what happened to the Clare Miners last week when they lost by 40? Is that another negative sign about where Clare hurling is going? We'll actually come back to that in a second. Let's go on to another comment here from Hughie Kennedy. I'd make a good few changes to that top 10. Callan was one of the brilliant players for at least a decade, but since he lifted the lean Mac, he's only a shadow of his former self. Surely he's gone. Adrian McGrath jumps in with the flying elbow. The amount of excuses being made for Callan by Shane is ridiculous. He isn't even a top 20 player right now in form. Ford is the only tip player that could even be considered. Wow. Donald Farrell, no disrespect to Shamey, Noel, Brendan or Paddy, Joe Canning, but a lot of the talk is about them being caught for legs, not bottle. Now, nobody's saying that about TJ. TJ is a cold-blooded assassin, which he is. Owen Mulligan, I think Galway will have heard all the criticism and will come out and hockey Waterford. Evan Nyland starting will make a big difference. Do you think he'll start?
Owen might know something that we don't know yet.
Owen, have you the rest of the team there?
I think if they do produce a big performance and if they have 7 or 8 points to spare against Waterford, Galway are back on the horse again and they're big contenders. There's that doubt of whether to actually be able to go and do that. And Nameless King, someone tell Verney that the barbers are open again. Jeez, it's not that bad.
It's a bit like a rat's nest. Yeah, you should get something done there. Would you not go all Dublin soccer haircut, get really slick, sharp on the sides, get a little line shaved in there, sweep it over, Brill cream to the max? I think you'd look unreal.
I haven't worn Brill cream since I was about 18, so no.
Yeah, you still wearing the Lynx Africa and the likes of that, you are?
There's nothing wrong with Lynx Africa.
So you are?
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with Lynx Africa.
You are stuck in the dark ages. Nameless King also adds in, nobody is saying it about TJ because he was never exceptionally quick and he's not surrounded by another 5 or 6 slow players. Fair point that he does have speed around him, but I would have said TJ Reid used to turn and cut right through the middle. I remember playing against Galway 2014 maybe in Tullamore. He collected the ball out around the 65, caught a puck out, turned and just ran at the Galway team, cut straight up through the centre, and I think like Kyle Hayes did the smacking the ball off the ground and buried it into the bottom corner.
Yeah, no,
I think he has evolved his game.
Yeah. He probably hasn't tried to do something like that in the last maybe 3 to 4 years, I'd say. And a lot of the goals you see him getting now are when he's coming on to a ball at pace and he has the defender on the back foot. But I think his game is less reliant on pace maybe than some of the other players that we've mentioned there.
Yeah, just a couple of comments on the top 10 hurlers. Patrick Hickey, Keane Lynch 1-2, Ford. Keane Lynch 1, Ford 2, then Hayes, Tony Kelly, Reid, Donald Burke, Cathal Malone, wow, Joe Canning, Sean Finn, Owen Cody. It's going to be an absolute nightmare picking these, isn't it? Joseph Nash added in, Galway to come back with anger. Clare have 3 good games under their belt. Cork only 1 game, advantage to Clare unless the legs go. Yeah, well, that game against Wexford last week, they did push it the whole way just to get home in that game. So maybe that'll catch up to them.
Just on that chain as well, you'd have to wonder with the heat and everything, like you'd have to be dehydrated for a day or two after a game like that. Like I know their age profile is quite good, probably outside of maybe John Conlon. But you'd wonder, you'd have a question about whether the bounce is still there in Clare. But in fairness to them, that they did have a bit of a gap after the Tipperary game. So they played they played this week, they played next week, they had a week off, then they played again. So I don't think that games in succession will catch them until maybe an All-Ireland quarter-final, like it did maybe last year. But you would have to question how much a game in those really, really, awful conditions for hurling in many respects for a player, because it's just so draining. You'd wonder how much that'll take out of them.
Yeah, Nameless King, Galway are in trouble with COVID, so there is that rumour, unsubstantiated at the moment, that they may be missing someone heading into this game. You don't really know if there's close contact issues with that, because some players would travel in the same car together and maybe that would end up... Sure, look, we saw what happened last year with the whole Wexford-Clare thing. That's kind of upped the ante a little bit. That was one of the big things, that Clare ended up having close contact cases, even though Wexford were the ones that had the positive. So
it's just it kind of goes back and highlights again, Shane, just how careful squads needed to be, and anybody
could decide the All-Ireland yet.
It could, of course, and anybody that was in any way lax, be it reconfirming their health questionnaire, doing wearing the face mask when they should be wearing the face mask, all of that will come back front and center, and there will be massive regrets from people if they're sidestepping any of what they need to be doing if something happens, and it could define people's seasons really.
Yeah, you had an interesting point just as we were preparing for the show. We were talking about Brian Lohan, and you were wondering, is there anyone who's more safe in their job at the moment, who has better job security as a county manager than Brian Lohan? Because, what he's doing in the face of the criticism of the county. Now, to be fair, it's a bit like the public is in behind him as criticism of the county board ramps up, and, the state of Cahir Lohan as the centre of excellence, and the pictures that we saw produced by the Sunday Times where, it looks like a calf shed with a few weights thrown around the place. And then Kieran Kingston, this is now his 4th year as manager. You obviously have to include the break where John Myler took over for a couple of years. He was a selector even before that. So if it doesn't happen, I think the trajectory of Cork hurling is like that. But if he loses this game, the pressure is on. I think Cork people expect to be Clare, don't they?
They would do, I think, yeah, they would do. I don't know if there's too much justification for that opinion at this moment in time, while they do look like things are going in the right direction. Clare have a lot in the bank, and Lohan definitely has a lot in the bank as well. Like, compare what we're saying now to what we were saying after they were beaten by Antrim up in Corrigan Park. Like, he's had a big championship win over Waterford, big championship win over Wexford, and they're playing great stuff as well, and they're starting games, unbelievably well. They're blitzing teams in the opening quarter. If they're able to, and I said it to you on Monday, if they're able to carry that form over for maybe a bit longer than the 20 or 25 minutes that they've done in those games, straighten up, they're shooting a bit more, just maybe even rushing shots at times as well. If Clare play a big game and only have 8 or 9 wides, they're going to be so hard beaten if they're more efficient in front of the post. So yeah, I do think Brian Lohan is definitely more than safe. With all the negativity around Clare, the senior hurlers are the kind of shining lights at the moment, in fairness. And like, players outside of Tony Kelly are stepping up as well. Be it Ryan Taylor, be it Cathal Malone, be it Aidan McCarthy at different stages, be it Rory Hayes, who's absolutely flying the last day as well. And it takes a little bit of pressure off Tony Kelly, John Conlon, etc. That's a really intriguing game, and I know you're going to go out. You might even fly down through their recent record since they played the 2013 All-Ireland final, the 2 games. Interestingly on that as well, Shane, from everything I'm hearing on the ground in Clare, Shane O'Donnell may be under pressure to even play for his club this year. Aero again, he's suffering the effects of a bad concussion that he received. I think it was the week of the Kilkenny League game. and it just a couple of quotes from Brian Lohan on it. He said at the time when he was ruled out of the Waterford game, he just said concussion is obviously a very serious matter now, and we're abiding by those rules. That's the COVID protocols. And then he just had a brief update on O'Donnell's health last week. He just said Shane is making progress, so we're just hoping that he'll be okay, regardless of hurling, just in his own life, that he'll be okay. And it just echo those sentiments as well. There's a couple of people who've gotten bad darts of concussion from either hurling or football in recent years, and obviously, first and foremost, their health is the most important thing, whatever about them getting back in the pitch. So I'd like to wish Shane a speedy recovery. It's a massive loss for Clare. And you obviously have the hat-trick hero of the 13 replay is going to be missing when they meet again in probably the biggest game they've played since then.
Yeah, actually, you know what? While you mention that, I think I'm going to look up the All-Ireland replay in 2013 and just have a quick look at the amount of players that are no longer on the panel, because there's been...
Shane, if you go through even the Cork and Clare teams for that day, like, geez, outside of Tony Kelly, Shane O'Donnell, John Conlon, I don't even know if there's another Clare player. Colin Galvin, maybe.
Yeah, and just a couple of comments in here. Class T-shirt, Verney. You're still a hipster, but that T-shirt deserves a mention.
This is an old Ring magazine cover. It's I got it in the Las Vegas fight shop. It's absolutely class now, in fairness. It's an all Muhammad Ali. It's talking about it's all to do with when he was going to fight Joe Frazier for the second time.
And of course, Will comes back in with the roundhouse. Old Staple with his 3 for €10 in penalties.
Good man, Will. Good man, Will.
€2.50. I couldn't stay looking at it. Pádraig Gill, guns looking well on the boys there. Michael Verney has just dropped off there. So we'll look at a couple of the other comments. John Collins, in recent years, Cork-Clare has been a shootout. Could be down to last in the pace. Advantage to the rest of the team. Very fair point. Will Skehalan during the week saying that Galway training is going very well. Manic aggression and that type of stuff. Patrick Hickey, Clare's record against Cork since 2013 is poor. And I actually was just going to bring that up. So the All-Ireland final obviously was a drawn one in 2013, 316 to 25 points. Then the replay, Clare won by a couple of goals, 516 to 316. Ever since then, 2014, 15, 17, 18, all those years, there were Cork wins until last year when Clare had a 223 to 218 win. Sorry, that was in 2019. So the record, if you go back to, and if you include the 2013 All-Ireland drawn and replay, the record from 2013 up to now is Cork with 5 wins, Clare with 2 wins, and 1 draw. So is there any bearing? Do we look into that at all? The results that Cork have had in the last few years. They have won 5 of the last 6 contests, but Clare won the most recent one.
Well, you probably have to place a fair bit of stock in it. I think was there 2 Munster finals in that as well?
I think so. Yeah, 2 in a row, wasn't it?
18 and I'm not too sure 17 or 18 or 18 and 19. But you probably have to take a fair bit of stock in that. Their style of play is probably a bit different this year and a bit more exaggerated, but it has definitely caused Clare an awful lot of trouble. It's going to be interesting to see from a Clare point of view. I know Patrick Horgan was quiet the last day, but you couldn't, not in a month of Sundays, could you expect him to be anywhere close to being that quiet again? And be interesting to see what sort of if the Cork train makes some sort of a mismatch in the full forward line. Conor Cleary is probably the one Clare would maybe like picking him up because. And I mean this with a compliment to him. He's a very, very good stopper, whereas maybe Rory Hayes would maybe hurl him a bit more. So it's going to be interesting to see who they get to pick up Horgan. But they've got a lot of Clare have got a lot of different questions to answer. Maybe Horgan could go at 11 and try and expose the space that probably John Conlon is going to try and sit into as well. And then you throw Kingston, throw potentially Alan Cadigan into the mix there as well. And Jack O'Connor, I'd say Rory Hayes is probably earmarked for Jack O'Connor. He's absolutely probably tailor-made for him pace-wise. But there's going to be some savage battles there, really, really interesting battles. And while Cork missed quite a bit against Limerick, there is a sense that it's just coming and it's going to click for them. And it mightn't be even this weekend. But if they can get over this weekend, I think they're one of the most, like I would probably say, as regards All-Ireland contenders, you're looking at Galway and Cork are the 2, I think, that can come through the qualifiers and potentially maybe go all the way to an All-Ireland final.
Yeah, Cork have been dirty in the togs for 16 years. They are, with the quality of players that they continually bring through, they have to win an All-Ireland at some point. Again, like from the outset of the season, my whole point was, and I think you kind of agreed, was that Cork are capable of beating anybody, but do we think they're capable of winning 4 games in a row to win an All-Ireland? And that's where the question is to beat. They have to win this preliminary or second round qualifier, then they have to win a quarterfinal, then a semi-final and an All-Ireland. And the temperature is only going to go up. Like their route to an All-Ireland here could be Clare, Tip, Kilkenny, Limerick. I mean, talk about the odds being stacked against you. And it might work out slightly different.
Fair sweet one to win.
Like it'd be an All-Ireland that nobody could question. I wondered, would Cork working the ball out short and trying to run it from the back, which at times was glorious against Limerick. When it worked, my God, Limerick could not live with them. And this is Limerick. Like Limerick are just, look at what they did to Tipperary. But at times, now both teams, their shooting went awry during the second half. But a Cork team in the past, after conceding those 2 goals just before half-time, they're obviously trying to build. They've got some younger players in there. Jeremy Millerick is coming in, having a great performance his first day out. Conor Cahalan, Jack O'Connor, he's there a couple of years. The likes of Robbie O'Flynn, didn't happen for him at all. But, this is a team that, maybe they could have down tools a little bit when it went against them at half-time. But I still think they played some unbelievable hurling that day. Will that work against Clare, or will the likes of Aidan McCarthy, whose work rate has been quite good, like the more I look at it, like David Reedy, Ryan Taylor, players like this, are they going to be able to shut them down? Cathal Malone, who's got a couple of nice scores the last day, hit a couple of bad wides too. Are they going to be able to work their way out through Clare?
They were able to work their way out through a higher end team in Limerick at times. So I'd be confident enough from their point of view that they will be able to work. Through that Clare kind of forward line and create a lot of openings. Interesting, 2 players you didn't mention, Alan Connolly and Shane Barrett. Like they were both pulled. They both can't play under 20s for Cork this year because they played senior. So you'd imagine that's a fair statement that both of those are going to feature very, very highly in Kieran Kingston's plans. Just something that we briefly mentioned as well. Kieran Kingston has to be under pressure coming into this game. He has to be. He's got a really, really high profile ticket. It's his second season. Like if they were to limp out at the first stage of the qualifiers, having been beaten in the qualifiers last year by Tipperary, like Cork's graph is going to be only on the up over the next couple of years. But in the short term, there could be a bit of short-term pain. And potentially he could be the manager that feels that short-term pain. It'd be like, can he have a third year if they're beaten at the weekend by Clare?
Depends on the manner of it. But you know what? I think it's a game that everyone in Cork expects that they will win, or expects that they should win. Clare have been quite impressive so far this year. Very good against Waterford the first day, faded out a little bit. Very good against Tipperary for long spells, faded out of it a little bit. Started brilliantly against Wexford, faded out of it a little bit. Now, it could be a couple of things. Do these players have the legs? Now, I'm not questioning the management in the S&C or anything like that, but sometimes some teams have better athletes. So is it that? Is it the management's ability to make changes when they need to be made during the game? I don't know. Or is it a combination of those two things? I think Cork have, geez, what a panel they have. And like you mentioned, the young players coming through and what's going on at underage. Their turnaround against Tip with the 20s last week. The delayed 2020 All-Ireland, winning that a couple of weeks ago, beating Clare by 40 points at the minors. Cork are coming and make.
It's only a matter of time, isn't it? It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have to worry about losing All-Irelands to them up there in Offaly. You've no concern about the All-Irelands.
They're in Munster, so I'll worry about what's in Leinster for the moment.
Yeah. Well, you're not in it anyway, so you don't have to worry about too much.
Touche.
But think of it this way, though. Will Clare be able to deal with the speed of Dara Fitzgibbon, Tim O'Mahony, Robbie O'Flynn, who was poor against Limerick, but has a bit of class about him, Conor Cahalan, Kieran Kingston. Will they be able to deal with those players running up through the centre? Will Diarmuid Ryan, John Conlon, Paddy Fitzpatrick, will they be able to deal with that?
I think David McInerney comes in at wing back for Paddy Fitzpatrick.
There was talk of that the last day too, and it didn't happen. Maybe it will happen. I mean, maybe some Clare fans out there would have some thoughts on that. But that's where I think in the heel of the hunt, Cork will win this game. I don't think Patrick Horgan can ever be as quiet again. I don't think Robbie O'Flynn can. Seamus Harnedy, assuming he's okay from that, what looked like maybe a dead leg against Limerick, if he's all right. He was a very important player in terms of he had won 2 puckouts in a row towards the latter end of the first half. He's taken out of the team then. Cork's puckouts imploded I don't think they'll implode against Clare because Clare's press isn't anything like Limerick's. Maybe I'm a little bit unfair. They can press the puck out, but is it the same level of press as Limerick? I don't think anyone does it like that. So for those reasons, I'm leaning towards Cork.
Yeah, I'd probably be leaning towards Cork as well. The 3-week kind of gap is a small, not a worry, but just 2 weeks probably would have been ideal. It'd be interesting to know what Galway and Cork did within that 3 weeks, whether they played a game or not. Probably a couple of internal games, but just probably think panel wise, even Cork's is probably a bit stronger. And just while the 3 weeks gap between games might have been a disadvantage, it is another 3 weeks for them to hone a game plan that does take a lot of time to be honed. And I was thinking like who picks up Dara Fitzgibbon. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if someone like David Reedy maybe came back midfield on him. I was given that type of assignment because I'm not sure. I don't think Cotton Malone or Colm Galvin would be given that job, and it really kind of size profile might suit Fitzgibbon a bit more. But
David
I think,
Reedy?
Yeah,
really, like an attacking forward who can knit the play. You'd put him on Dara Fitzgibbon's pace running forward.
David Reedy is. Are you telling me David Reedy's not fast?
No, not that. But it's like he's not a back. I don't think I've ever seen him just going out to track people.
Yeah, I think that could potentially happen this weekend. Yeah, I don't think the other two midfielders would really suit Fitzgibbon, and even Fitzgibbon, while a bit off in front of the post against Limerick at different stages, did do a lot of damage. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if Reedy was in more of a defensive role, and Galvin was allowed to maybe go forward a bit more, or even kind of knit the play a bit more, and even if Malone was up at wing forward. It's maybe swapping places with Reedy this weekend. But I think Cork asked Clare a lot more questions than Clare asked Cork. The flip side of that is who do Cork assign to Tony Kelly, which is kind of like that. It's asked every time they play, but it's a pertinent question for every game that they play. And it's not something I had given a great amount of thought to. But who do you think would be the most likely to track him?
When I was thinking about it last night, right? So you look through the backs that Cork had the last day. So Niall O'Leary, Damien Cahalane, who, credit must go to Cahalane because he's been, he's had plenty of arrows fired in his direction over the years. I thought he was quite good the last day. And I mean, yeah, he was very good. Sean O'Donoghue cleaned Aaron Gillane out of it. Owen Cadigan is there. Mark Coleman, who is, will be sitting in the pocket, and Tim O'Mahony. So of those, who would I trust to mark Tony Kelly if he was out the field or if he was in the full forward line? In the heel of the hunt, Owen Cadigan can play anywhere, but I just don't know if the change of direction suits, marking someone who's maybe early 30s versus Sean O'Donoghue. I want to keep Donoghue close to goal, but to me, Donoghue is the guy that makes most sense. And by the way, Liam Ryan made a good point on Dara Fitzgibbon, maybe Diarmuid Ryan on him.
Maybe you'll be taking a guy that's played really well wing back and putting him out midfield, which might structurally change their team a lot. I don't agree with Liam O'Callaghan there. I don't think Cadigan goes on Kelly. Pace wise, and if he was in the full forward line, maybe, but out around the pitch, floating around, I don't see it. But these are all the really interesting questions. Interesting to see whether Bill Cooper comes back into the equation, Conspallan as well. Like, Jesus, when you put it down on paper, Cork have some amount of options when they have everybody fit.
Yeah, Millard Evans says, thanks for doing these shows, lads. And obviously, if there's anyone out there who wants to join the OurGame Supporters Club, it's €5 per month. Great way to support the channel, and you get all your audio podcasts that way. So then I just wanted to look at the...
€5 that you can buy 2 pennies t-shirts with.
Yeah, exactly. Jeez, help me get a couple of more of these puppies. What was I going to say there? Yeah, the 2013 teams from the All-Ireland. I was looking at the Cork team. Only 2 players remain from 8 years ago. Isn't that quite unbelievable?
Just 1 second now. 2 players from 2013. Patrick Horgan and... did Cadigan start the 13 final?
Nope.
No.
He wasn't brought on either.
Seamus Harnedy, sorry.
Maybe he was with the footballers. Yeah, correct. It was Harnedy. And then on the other side, I think it's 4. I'll have to double check here again. So David McInerney. Now he may or may not start. Maybe it's 5 actually. So we can't count Patrick O'Connor at the moment because he's out for the season. Colm Galvin, John Conlon, and Tony Kelly, and then Shane O'Donnell is out also for the season. So there's 4 there, and I mean that's across both panels here. There's only those 6 players that will probably feature this weekend. That's quite incredible. Where in other sports is the turnover as big as that? Like you might see Liverpool with the same players for 5, 6, 7, 10 years in some cases. But
Yeah, no, it's true.
Maybe there is that turnover in all sports.
8 years is quite a bit of time, and I suppose the game has changed a good bit since then as well. But if you had said with the the age profile of Clare's panel back then that so many would be gone by this stage, you probably wouldn't have believed it. I was only thinking, Shane, as well. Just if Lohan was able to get Peter Duggan back, and Shane O'Donnell was back next year, back fully fit. Like all of a sudden, they're like far more of a weapon at senior level than anybody would have expected them to be. So like he has to be commended for how he's raised kind of drooping spirits over the last 2 years.
Yeah, Mike Sinnott says, watched Clare beat us Yellow Bellies last weekend. Can honestly see Clare running them off the park. Cork miles quicker than the likes of Fitzpatrick, Malone and Cleary. Liam O'Callaghan added that Cooper and Luke Meade, who came on after 50 minutes for Harrendy the last day, have to come in, and adds that Ger Millerick maybe for Kelly. If he was in the full back line, full forward line, I couldn't see Millerick going on him. Maybe, and like Millerick did quite a good job on Cian Lynch for a nice bit of the game the last day. So Mark Coleman picked him up when he was in his area, but when Lynch drifted out the field, Millerick went on him. So I think even that and the way that works suggests a nice bit of leadership in this Cork team. They'd obviously seen how that matchup had exploded for them in the league match, and they were, beaten off the park, and they adjusted and they went on again and they found a new solution. So, you're talking about Kieran Kingston and, could this be the end? I don't think so. I definitely couldn't see that being the way. I think unless they have a disastrous performance, that changes everything. Will, I think it's fair to say that Clare are not just TK anymore. He's had a few average days by his standards, and others have stepped up. He didn't score from play the last day, so
just on that point, Shane, the fact that the first question we're asking about Clare is not who's going to be marking Tony Kelly is a very, very positive thing for them.
Yeah, Flannery, Shane, Edward. Are Galway overlooking Waterford with an eye on tip in the quarters? If so, Waterford could turn them over.
Well, if they are, they're absolutely bonkers because the way they hurled 3 weeks ago, they shouldn't be overlooking anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're both going with Cork there?
Just about, yeah. But I think Clare will really, really go down fighting. Be very interesting if Clare get off to that thunderous start again and ask Cork big questions and are up by 4 or 5 early.
Yeah, this weekend now sees a battle of Laois against Westmeath. It's a Division 1 relegation playoff, so it's not actually championship. Last weekend I was there to watch Westmeath beat Kerry and beat them well in the Joe McDonagh Cup final. They were absolutely sensational. So many different scorers stepping up. Niall Mitchell, he was the pick of the bunch as far as I was concerned. People talk about Kyle Hayes scoring that goal, the way he soloed through and batted it with the toe of the hurley facing down. Niall Mitchell actually did it and knocked it into the top corner with the hurl a little bit upside down. And then Laois, considering how they started their championship against Wexford, where they were absolutely dreadful, they were really good against Antrim and then gave a great performance against Waterford last week. Plus, I mean, this is a finely balanced one. They both played Division 1 and they both had tough times in Division 1 this year. Which way are you leaning here?
This is like by far and away the most important game that these two teams have played this year. So Westmeath are going into the Leinster Championship next year. If they're going into the Leinster Championship playing Division 2A hurling, let's call it a spade. They're on an absolute hiding to nothing. They're going to be playing teams at a much lower level and they will not be prepared for what's coming in the Leinster Championship. They just won't. Laois are already going to be in the Leinster Championship as well. Similar story with them if they're going down to 2A. It kind of you obviously can't change structures just because of the way that is, but you wouldn't.
Sure, we do it all the time.
Well, yeah, well that's true too. Yeah, we are very, very good at changing rules and structures, but one of these teams is going to be really hurting over a couple of years as a result of this game at the weekend, and one of them is going to hurt next year big time because one of them is going into a Leinster Championship with very, very ill prepared, and they just will not be ready for what's coming. Very, very difficult to call this game. Westmeath have played Division 1 this year. Obviously, probably had a lot of poor results outside of that display against a second string Waterford team. Laois were in the other group, what you would probably say is on paper the weaker group, but it doesn't really look like it now with Kilkenny Leinster champions, Dublin Leinster finalists, and Clare going as well as they are now. And but Laois didn't produce much during the league. They're coming right at the right time, I would say now. Like the Wexford game does seem like a long time away at this stage. So I would probably be just edging towards Laois. And the fact that Westmeath have won the Joe McDonagh, that's great, but they've been playing against a lower standard of opposition over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Whereas Laois, and in fairness, fair enough, they took a hiding. They've put up a right good showing against Waterford, and they have beaten Antrim already. So I just be favouring Laois, and I'd be interested to see in the bacon heat whether maybe it won't be too bad in the evening whether Cheddar is still wearing that boiler suit. How he does it, I'll never know. Like, by all accounts, some of the journalists were interviewing him after the match the other day, like, and he was nearly out of pain with the the sweat that was rolling down his face. Remember Carter Healy telling me before that they went to Spain or somewhere like that in the training camp, and Cheddar had the tinsel hat on for the whole week. It's just mad. He's madman, but his passion and love for Laois hurling definitely knows no bounds. I just think they'll see it out, providing there was no major injuries out of last weekend's defeat to Waterford. I think they'll just edge it. What do you think yourself?
Yeah, I'm going with Laois. The home advantage is key here. It is at O'Moore Park and like 7:30, as you said. And I watched them up close against Antrim, and looking at what Enda Rowland did with those puckouts, dropping them on the 14. I think we've seen probably footage of club action before, and he's putting them all the way on the 14. And didn't he do a couple of quick puckouts now and again, and he's able to drive it over the bar after taking quick puckouts? So I can see them loading the full forward line again for those puckouts and putting Dara Egerton, Tommy Gallagher and Conor Shaw under a nice bit of bother, and goalkeeper Noel Connaughty. I look at Paddy Purcell, and I think this is a lad who has to get an All-Star nomination at this stage. He scored 2-2 against Antrim. He was very good last week against Waterford. I wonder about the matchup. Like, Dara Egerton was excellent against Shane Conway last week when Conway was playing in the inside line. Will he come up against Ross King? That maybe that's a tasty little matchup. PJ Scully is the other option. I look at a high score in midfield on both sides. I think Jack Kelly, that he could get a few scores here. I think Robbie Greville the same. Davy Glennon, who picks him up? He was really good the last day. And the one thing
Donegal Hartnett's the man for him, I'd imagine.
Yeah, but then that would bring him out to the half back line probably. And then if you look at the half back line that Laois had the last day, 2 days ago anyway, when I watched them, Podge Delaney, Kieran McAvoy, Ryan Mullaney, all massive players. I don't know if any of them necessarily would want to be playing in the full back line against some of the speed in there. Kieran Doyle, Niall O'Brien, Niall Mitchell. Now they may swap around, and maybe Killian Doyle or somebody else will swap in. But there's plenty of conundrums there. I think there's, just on the basis that Laois have been playing against Liam McCarthy teams all season, that Westmeath obviously did and got beaten from pillar to post most days in Division 1A. Then they were playing the Joe McDonagh Cup. Laois have been playing stronger opposition most days. And I'd say the confidence in defeat that they gained against Waterford, I'd just about give them a nudge there. And
just an interesting one, Shane, as well. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if Tommy Doyle was back full back under Roland's puckouts. He's been playing centre back, but he's obviously played full back for years. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they plant him back on the edge of the square with how long those puckouts are going to be going down. But yeah, just be favouring Laois ever so slightly.
Yeah, Tyke J. Fanning, really hope that they go back to the round robin in Munster and Leinster next year. Makes way more sense, way more exciting. I agree, actually. Will, I can't imagine Galway are overlooking Waterford after that performance against Dublin. If they are, it's criminal, but I can't imagine. But I imagine they are pure focused on baiting Waterford out the gate. Liam O'Callaghan obviously talking about Cheddar Plunkett's hat. It's stitched to his head, he can't get it off. Let's see earlier, Kevin O'Sullivan, I heard some nonsense talked earlier about soft underage titles for Galway. Sure, Galway only had to beat the Munster and Leinster champions to win it, who had the benefit of games under their belt. Will, I can imagine Verney must be sweating his bollocks off in that weather with the t-shirt, with the O.J. Simpson fro. Let's see. The usual, Peter Cleary, the usual lazy narrative about Waterford players when they lose. Cahill gets the plaudits when they win. Players are blamed when they lose. Were Wexford players' attitude questioned after 2 poor years? No. Well, they were questioned by their own manager last year when they lost to Galway. The manager said that they put the white flag up. He later kind of changed his story on that, but you can't unsay words like that.
I don't think it's a lazy narrative. It's just like, you're just going back on in recent years, particularly in Pádraig Fanning's year, the players would definitely have had to come into question that year. I know we obviously gave Liam Catlin a lot of plaudits last year, but rightfully so, because Waterford had produced some shocking performances in 2019. then all of a sudden he comes in and they're, serious Munster contenders and they're beaten in an All-Ireland final. That's not to say that we didn't give a load of credit to the players. Of course we did. And I think the caveats of De Borca, O'Keefe been missing, Prunty been out the last day, and Barron, like they were what we really focused on. Peter Cleary does say there as well, Early Daly and Majored out for Saturday. If that's true, I don't know, maybe they're going to have to bring Austin Gleeson back then again, but that creates another conundrum. So you probably have a Galway side that potentially could be hit with COVID and close contacts, and a Waterford side that could be missing, that are going to be missing their starting keeper, starting centre back from last year, and could be missing their starting centre back for this year. So yeah, that's a real intriguing game.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on now to the Christy Ring Cup semi-final. Your Offaly are back in action and are going to spank Wicklow. I'd say you're about to tell us who you also played for, and Derry against Sligo.
Yeah, funny enough, I thought my phone would be hopping this week, and they'd be looking to like how many.
Someone wants you playing for them.
How many former Offaly and Wicklow hurlers are there like that can give an eye into both camps? Like, in fairness, I thought my phone would be absolutely hopping this week. No, in all seriousness, the fact that Offaly had beaten Sligo earlier, they earned a home semi-final, and like everything is pointing towards, you'd be saying realistically, and not putting pressure on the boys, but you'd be saying, a 15-point win minimum. That's just, Offaly were brilliant throughout the league. Probably didn't start particularly great against Sligo, and Sligo probably put up a bigger tally than we would have expected them to. Offaly put up a massive tally in 2:39, and I'm expecting them to put up a big tally against Wicklow and power to the final. The other semi-final is interesting. Derry side who have won their 2 games so far, against the Sligo side that performed with credit against Offaly. This will be tighter than people think. It took Sligo, till the very last minute to overcome Roscommon last weekend. I think it was 120 to 218. But they're dangerous enough, and Derry would be silly to overlook them. But I definitely will be going for Derry, and it predicted to be a Derry-Offaly final. I think they played in the quarter final last year. But a Derry-Offaly final. Anything other than that would be a massive shock.
Yeah, in the Nicky Rackard semi-final this weekend, Mayo against Armagh, Tyrone against Donegal. Just to look at the groups, Mayo topped their group with 2 wins from 2. Donegal came second, Leitrim third, and Tyrone won their only group game, which was against Armagh. And then last week in the quarterfinals, Armagh this is a few weeks ago, Armagh hockeyed Tyrone. Leitrim. No, it was last weekend. Apologies. Armagh hockeyed Leitrim 725 to 121. So are you looking at Mayo to still get the job done against Armagh here?
Yeah, flagged it from the start. I can't see anything other than a Mayo-Donegal final, the same as last year, where Donegal edged them out. Mayo have beaten Donegal already this year in the Rackard group stages, but they'd definitely be the two you'd favour. And while some people might say it's an easy narrative to use, but Key Higgins coming back for Mayo is a massive boost, particularly at that level. The fact that he's even captain the side as well. And anything other than a Mayo Donegal final would be a surprise there too. And then just looking at the Laurie Maher Cup, I know you have a bit of insight into this.
I don't. You won't tell me anything.
Yeah, my prediction of Monaghan doing well in the Laurie Maher Cup has been ripped up, unfortunately. But the semi-final this weekend is Longford against Fermanagh. Longford have put up huge scores so far, so you would be favouring them there. And Cavan versus Louth are the holders coming up against. I think there's a couple of cooler boys involved with Cavan there, so that would be an interesting game as well.
Yeah, Brian Fitzgerald, I was on to him a couple of times during the week. Obviously, they won last weekend, and I was trying to ask him how many he scored. He got 1 point from play. I was expecting a little bit more, and maybe he'll produce it this weekend against Louth. But Louth won it last year, wasn't it?
Louth won it last year, yeah. It's funny, like you were saying about Brian Fitzgerald, and there's so many Johnny Tightlips going around on all these inter-county panels that will not tell you anything. They ain't saying nothing.
Yeah, actually, a funny one with Breezer, Brian Fitzgerald Breezer, as he's known. He was lining out both, obviously a lot of players, they play for both the first team and the second team within their clubs. So there was a county final for, I think maybe 2014 or 2015 anyway. Matty Kenny was manager of probably both teams actually. And going into the final, they had to name the teams for the programme. But, and they were obviously under pressure to just get the names in because all we call him is Breezer. Matty couldn't, I think, well, maybe it wasn't Matty, but whoever it was giving in the names couldn't think of his name. So it appeared in the programme as Breezer Fitzgerald.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Great.
That's a funny one, actually, because I was over our 20s with Barry Whelan in 2012, I think, and it's name a team for the programme and name a panel. And one of the boys, his name is Darren Sullivan, but he hasn't been called Darren in about 20 years. Everyone calls him Tom. So I just put his name down as Tom Sullivan in the programme. His mother was going absolutely ballistic.
I actually did that for the Back of the Star once. I was doing I think Tipperary had named their team or whatever, and Niall O'Mara, who's referred to as Bill O'Mara in Tipperary, he was making his debut, and I had on the back of the paper, Bill O'Mara makes his debut for Tipperary. So, hey, these things happen. Right, a couple of more comments coming in, and then we're going to do the top 10 hurlers in Ireland. Verney played for Wicklow. Never knew that. How did that come about? And Alan Owens adds, pure mercenary.
I played with Wicklow a couple of years ago. I'd have an aunt and an uncle both living in Wicklow, so I was living there for a while, and it kind of suited me because I was under pressure at work. I couldn't get back down the road for club training, so I played with them in 17 and 18 before removing myself from the panel in 18 because I couldn't get a game, and I couldn't get my head around how I couldn't get a game. So played Christy Ring in 17. Came on with about 5 minutes to go, I started feck all games, and I don't think that's more of an indictment on them than me, I think.
Yeah, well, at least you're obviously not carrying that with you. You've obviously gotten over it by the look on your
face. Chip on both shoulders, Shane. You stay balanced when you have a chip on both shoulders.
Patrick Coleman, Offaly are back. Offaly for the All-Ireland by 2023.
Can I just say something on that? The most promising thing in Offaly at the moment is how competitive all our underage teams are at the moment. Dublin bet the 20s by a goal the other night, and we got off to a slow start. I think there was a point or two in it with Kilkenny last night up until they pulled away in the home stretch. The footballers, under 20s, are in the Leinster final. The minors were in last year's Leinster final. So I think all anybody looks for in the county is that teams are being prepared as well as possible and doing as well as possible. Don't expect them to be winning everything right like that, but just expect them to be competitive. And that's the most promising thing from an Offaly point of view in football and hurling at the moment.
Okay, now we're going to look at the top 10 hurlers. Chris Neville said TJ Reid 1, Kyle Hayes 2, Keane Lynch, Tony Kelly, Jason Ford, Joe Canning, Bubbles Dwyer, Donald Burke. He kind of left it at 8 players. Right, let's get straight into it. Has anything changed in terms of our top 10? Was it Tony Kelly, TJ?
Tony Kelly, TJ, Seamus Callan, Dahi Burke, Sean Finn, Joe Canning, Patrick Horgan, Keane Lynch, Garrod Hegarty, Pádraig Mannion. The big thing, Shane, is Kyle Hayes, you'd imagine, would probably have to come into the conversation a lot more than he did the last day.
Yeah, he didn't really come into the conversation. But I wonder, that game against Tipperary, was he brilliant for 17 minutes, or did he just score one of the greatest goals of all time? And that's the only thing. A bit like if you play a game as a wing back and you catch 2 balls, you mightn't have done feck all for the rest of the game, but all anyone remembers is the great catches you did. So it kind of papers over any cracks there may or may not have been. Like, I thought Michael Breen did a great job in him for the most part.
No, he did, yeah. No, in fairness. But, the goal against Cork, the goal against Tip, and the threat that he now poses to opposition teams.
Man of the match in an All-Ireland final a couple of years ago in a different position.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has to go in here, doesn't he? Somewhere.
I think he does have to go in. It'll probably be at the lower end of the 10, if I'm being honest, because you can't just be that overreactionary to say, oh, Kyle Hayes wasn't in top 10, has to be in at number 2 or number 3. Like, I don't think you can stand over that. Like, I do see the top 10 changing, but I don't think we're not going ripping it up or anything. My opinions on, Dahi Burke or Sean Finn haven't changed massively, or Joe Canning haven't changed, to the extent where they're going to just fall out of the top 10, like as a result of, 1 or 2 games that we've seen. But I definitely think probably Seamus Callan does need to drop down from number 3. I don't think there's any way we can have him at number 3 at this moment in time.
And I think Joe Canning probably has to drop too, because we were kind of, when we did the show the last time, we said, well, look, I think the Waterford game in the league showed that he's kind of back on form. Forget about last season, which wasn't his best season. He's back on form and he'll hit the ground running in this championship. but he was very poor against Dublin, probably his worst ever game for the county. So I think he's going to have to drop down. I think Austin Gleeson has to be in the conversation at this point.
Okay, just quickly there. Who are the bolters since the last day? Just even write down a short list. Kyle Hayes is definitely a bolter. Austin Gleeson, you'd say, probably would be a bolter as well. Does any Dublin player come into the equation?
Owen O'Donnell. I know he got injured the last day, but I don't think we had, he was brilliant in the semi-final against Galway. He got injured the last day. But to me, he's the best fullback in the country, and that includes Daithí Burke.
Oh, I don't know if he's better than Daithí Burke, but
he doesn't have as good of players around him.
He definitely is. He definitely is in the conversation. The thing I'll say as well about players that come in here, I think players that are in the top 10 almost have to be bulletproof. You shouldn't be able to really pick any holes, be it pace. You shouldn't be able to say, oh, well, he's caught for pace, or he can't do X, Y, and Z. They should be nearly bulletproof, and I think that's maybe what we need to be. That's probably what we need to have settled on, players that other teams won't be able to exploit really in any way.
If it needs to be found, I'll get a video of Owen O'Donnell burying the ball into the top corner for Whitehall Colm Kill when he was playing centre forward a couple of years ago. The man can hurl. He mightn't have the same glorious, classy striking style as other lads, but he's forceful in every which way. So I will be pushing hard for him to go in. But one or two are going to drop out. Now, first off, does Tony Kelly stay at number one? The last day he was held scoreless, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he drops off the top spot.
Yeah, no, I'd still be happy enough with Kelly at number one. He was obviously brilliant against Waterford the first day out. He got 1-1 against Tip, albeit was quiet enough. You have to remember he's getting extra attention that a lot of other players maybe are not getting. He was relatively quiet the other day, but still did some very good things. I don't think he's played 3 games this year. He's probably been an average of probably 7.2 or 7.3 over the course of those 3 games. I still think he's been very he's been consistently class.
Yeah, look, I can't really argue that point, but I would say Cian Lynch has made a fair old play to be number one here. We had him at number 8 the last day. We're disgraced for only having him at number 8. I think he maybe comes in at number 1.
No, I think it's too much. I think it's too much of a jump, to be honest with you.
Is he Limerick's greatest ever player?
Is he better than Kieran? Is he better than his uncle Kieran Carey? Better than Gary Kirby? Better than Joe McKenna, who won 5 All-Stars, I think, at full forward? Better than Eamon Cregan? I think that's a bit much now at this stage.
Okay, greatest 21st century player.
Yeah.
They've had some very good players, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I don't think there's no one jumping off the page at me. They're all stars.
Andrew Shaughnessy was brilliant there for a number of years. Ollie Moran was excellent for a few years. Yeah,
Ollie Moran was an all-star. Richie McCarthy was an all-star during that time. Probably of the 21st century. So he's the best. He's the best of this crew at the moment, anyway. So he definitely needs to come up much higher in the conversation. All right. I personally wouldn't have him at 1.
Okay, so people out there, get your comments in. I think we're looking at number 1 at the moment. I mean, I'm pushing Cian Lynch for number 1. Tony Kelly, I'm pushing for number 1. TJ Reid's in that conversation. Anyone else come in that conversation? Who do you think among those 3? So you're still going TK number 1?
I'm still going TK number 1, yeah.
Yeah, I think what he's done against the odds in a team Kilkenny have been winning more championships and winning more championship matches in the last couple of years. So I think the fact that Clare in general have been at a lower ebb overall, got to the semi-final in 2018. I'm going with TK number 1, but Cian Lynch is a huge reason that Limerick have become so dominant.
Cian Lynch is coming into probably the top 3, realistically, I would say.
Yeah, and why would you put TJ Reid ahead of him?
Because he's probably he's still doing it with a team that is not of the same ability as Limerick. He doesn't have the same players around him as Cian Lynch has around him. Now, in fairness to Lynch, he makes that whole Limerick engine tick. But I would still have TJ ahead of him just for probably his greater in many ways the greater versatility in the things that he can do for a team. Particularly, I know he was kind of snuffed out in the air by Paddy Smith, particularly in the last 15 or 20 minutes of the Leinster final. But just the balls that he can win when they need to be won. The fact that if you took, I'd put it this way: could Limerick win an All Ireland without Cian Lynch?
I'll put it to you this way: can Kilkenny win in All Ireland? Because they'll have to beat Keane Lynch along the way.
Yeah, but Kilkenny would not have a snowball's chance in hell of winning an All Ireland without TJ Reid. Like he's not carrying them maybe to the same extent, but he is still carrying a massive load for them. Like I've no issue. I don't have too much issue with TJ or Keane Lynch 2 or 3 for either. I would I would still keep my top 2 the same, and I'm not one for having a massive overreaction to what we've seen just over the last month. It's not as if TJ Reid has been atrocious, far from it. I think he hit 4 or 5 from play against Wexford, and his nerveless penalty against Dublin killed off the game the other day as well.
Well, it's not like Keane Lynch has only been doing it for a couple of months either, though. Like he has been doing it for 6 or 7 years here.
He's hurler of the year 3 years ago.
Yeah, and both of these players, and the same is true of Kelly and probably a couple of more in this list, that the opposition, an awful lot of their game plan defensively is around how do we stop this person? I don't care if X, Y, and Z does the scoring, but we're not going to be beaten by Keane Lynch today, or we're not going to be beaten by TJ Reid. And Tipperary obviously can for Keane Lynch, but ultimately, as Tipperary fell apart, Keane Lynch just grew and grew, and he was part of the reason that they grew. Like I wouldn't say he set up the Kyle Hayes goal, because Kyle Hayes ran 90 yards with it, but it was his interplay, his link play. He's getting on the score sheet. He's winning frees constantly. TJ Reid is obviously, there's so much planning goes into stopping him, but Paddy Smith clearly won that battle the last day. In normal time, actually, do I have it here? I just want to see what he scored in normal time against Wexford that day. So
I think it was 4 or 5. I think he 16.
No, it wasn't. It was overall, including extra time. I think it was
16 points altogether. Yeah.
Yeah. So he got 4 from play, 1 in the first half, 2 in the second half, and then 1 in extra time. So he was very good. But Matt O'Hanlon had a decent game also.
Just interesting, Shane.
Generally, if he wins a battle, his man has also done fairly well too. Even go back to last year, Joseph Cooney won that battle, but Reid got the decisive goal. So, I'm trying to talk him down from 2 to 3 here. I'm still saying he's class, but it's just, if we're looking at the fine margins, I think Keane Lynch is just so destructive.
I think it's interesting that the 3 players that we're talking about for 1, 2, and 3 are the 3 most targeted players in the country in many ways. Like the stat, if you're playing against Clare, number 1, who's marking Tony Kelly? If you're playing against Kilkenny, number 2, who's marking TJ? Number 3, if you're playing against Limerick, who's going to pick up Keane Lynch and stop him basically controlling and dictating affairs? So I'm happy with the top 3. Can Lynch jump in at number 2? Jerome Elric did a good job on him when they played against Cork in the first round. In fairness,
as good a job as Paddy Smith did on TJ.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, potentially. Yeah, they're both we're nitpicking to basically decide who's 2 or 3 between two of the greats. The thing about Lynch, I will say, is, and why maybe he deserves to be number 2, is how many years is Keane Lynch going to be hurling for Limerick? Probably another 5 or 6. Do you know how many more years TJ going to be playing for Kilkenny? Listen, he could still be playing for 5 or 6, but I'd say you're looking at maybe more 2 or 3.
Keane Lynch is 25.
Yeah, it's nuts, isn't it? He's going to be tormenting. He's going to be tormenting Eby's and Munster for a long time.
Will you shut up? Leave us alone. No, he has to be number 2 because he's got years of being a top player ahead of him. He's not going to jump in and out of games. He's going to be a 70-minute player for years to come. TJ is still absolutely brilliant. Don't anyone try and confuse my words. He's still absolutely brilliant. But picking between the 2, give me one of them. I'm taking Lynch.
Okay, can I just say as well, it's not as if TJ has fallen down the list. It's just somebody else is just rose above him at the moment, basically.
Yeah. Jack Nulty, Hayes ahead of Kelly and Reid. Are you going on current form? Going on everything, really. Keane Lynch up the list, I'd say. Let's see, what else? Jack Nulty, Kelly, Reid, Hayes in any order. Chris Neville would put Cathal Barrett in there somewhere too, actually. I think Donald Burke is the most underrated hurler in Ireland at the moment. Any thoughts on that? Actually, there's a lot of talk about Jason Ford here. Pa O'Connor, Jason Ford top 3 on current form, and Jimmy Juice's bar agrees. Mark Corcoran, freeze sidelines, left and right distant points. Ford has some focus. I'll get my quote. Yeah.
Can I just say? I'm going to put you on the spot here. Like
Don't.
as a Tipperary man, like could you stand over Ford but in the top 10? Because there would be or would have been a train of thought in Tipperary and further afield that potentially that Ford could have been seen somewhat as a liability for maybe his lack of pace in attack. Just saying that's a train of thought. I'm not saying whether it's true or not, but yes, he was brilliant the other day, but he was brilliant for the first half an hour the other day.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
The entire team imploded. So, like, as I said to you before, I'm not sure who you would have necessarily picked as the person to take off. I would have there's definitely changes. Haven't watched it back. After about 40 minutes, when it was very clear that Limerick had taken over, that's when you needed to bring in Cadell, Keogh and Brian McGrath, for example, Willie Connors. Get the energy in there. The thing was falling apart. Some of Tipperary's older players were struggling with the pace. We'll put it that way. Obviously, there should have been red cards for Limerick. That's fine. I would rather learn the hard lessons by Limerick keeping those players on the field so that Tip know a little bit more for later on down the line. I think Callanan, and look, there's plenty of comments slating Callanan here. Shane, honestly, take Callanan out of top 10 for good and glory and set up a Callanan fan club to placate your obsession on Facebook or something. Could build a shrine to him in Templemore. Surely he'd want it out in the rag there beside the Drum and Inch Club. But I do think that Seamus Callanan is a player that hasn't had a pre-season, and he definitely struggled with the pace late on. But he never got a good ball into him. And what I kind of thought is, it was like watching Shane Bennett a few years ago when he was outnumbered and all he was doing was just chasing people up front. Remember in the All-Ireland final, all he was doing was basically just chasing people down. That's not
just say something on that. Like if you have a team then that's not playing to your strengths, then you're not going to be in the top. You're not going to be in the top 10. You're not going to be as lethal as you were. They were playing to his strengths in 2019, and he was goal a game. He was. Yeah. I think his form has probably peaked at the end of 2019. If you look at 2020, struggling for injury last year, was more of a worker than a scorer, maybe outside of that Galway game, and it kind of is like outside of that really, really soft goal that Ever Quilligan let in against Clare. Like he's not lighting it up on the scoreboard, far from it, and he's more of a worker bee at this moment in time and over the past couple of years than the lethal forward that we knew, who was nominated for Hurler of the Year 4 times and won it once.
Yeah, I got an email in from Marty Burt who said, any chance you could give the Derry under-17s a mention on your programme? We Derry play Wicklow in the Michael Hogan Celtic Challenge final under-17s in Dublin on Saturday evening. Panel of 32 won the Celtic Challenges in 2018 and 19. No competition, obviously, last year. Ryan O'Neill, Kevin Kelly, myself, and Kate Farron, our physio. We all work with the Derry 20s and are in the All-Ireland Under-20B final versus Meath in a couple of weeks' time. Had to travel to Sligo on Tuesday night, passed and beat them after a tight battle by 7 points. Good luck also to our seniors who play Sligo in the Christy Ring Cup semi-final. Another comment in here, unreal performances this year by Simon Donoghue, Rory O'Connor and Lee Chin. O'Donnell from Dublin was class against he obviously means Galway. Tony Kelly still number one, followed closely by TJ Reid. I wouldn't have Jason Ford in the top 10 here. If he did what he did against Limerick 3 or 4 more times, I always thought when Jason Ford came through, right, this is going to be the successor to Callanan in a few years' time, whenever Callanan gets to the stage that he has to retire. But it just hasn't kind of happened for whatever reason. I think if you were to go top wrists in Ireland, he'd be in the top 5. Top free takers in Ireland, he'd be in the conversation for number 1. But I don't think I could have him in here. And I think because Callanan clearly isn't fully fit right now, or being used 100% in the way that Tipperary would want, which is him inside the 14 with the ball in his hand, I think maybe he drops down the list a little bit too here. So he drops down the list a fair bit, and I can't believe you're not trying to replace a tip man with another tip man. Yeah, but people accuse me of bias all the time, and I'm just trying to call it. The disrespect of Jason Ford, lads. That's what I'm hearing here.
Oh no, not disrespecting him, but you're looking at a body of work. Like Jason Ford was sensational in 2018. Sensational. Yeah. He was brilliant. He turned his body inside out and was in brilliant form. But like, my memory's a small bit foggy. But like, how good or bad was he against Clare the first day out?
Who?
Ford.
Let's see. I have the.
I can't actually think offhand. He was absolutely deadly in the first half an hour against Limerick, and almost unmarkable when he was shut down a bit.
I got a couple of points. Yeah, no, they scored 1-3 against Oh no, sorry, the goal was a penalty. He scored a couple of points from play against Clare, and obviously drove over a sideline as well. It's the second time of asking. Remember, he was made go back and play the second time. So from place, ball is unbelievable. But
I'm going to have to see a bit more. I think you are too, and even more consistency.
Yeah, Shane Wall, I'm a Kilkenny man, but you have to mention Ford. In terms of class, I mean, it's not up for consideration. Like, he's absolutely unbelievable hands. And if he did what he did against Limerick a few more times, and a lot of that is based on the team around you, making sure you're on the front foot, he could be as good as anyone, really. And John Hassett, gents, don't overcomplicate the process. If there was a transfer market in the morning, which players would command the highest fees? Look at future potential as well as past performances.
I like the future potential thing, because like when you look at it, Keane Lynch and Tony Kelly still have massive future potential, particularly Lynch. TJ Reid maybe not as much. We probably need to start going down this. We think we're happy with our top three at the moment.
Yeah, Keane Lynch has 2 All-Irelands and a great highlight reel. Been way more consistent than TK if you look at them since 2017. Same with Ford, says Mark Corcoran.
Yeah, but you're taking in a body of work that Kelly has done since 13 or just before.
12 even. He scored a 21-yard free against Dublin in 2012 down in Cusack Park. Yeah. Not sure if there's a goalkeeper, but probably should. Shane Wall saying Owen Murphy, obviously a brilliant keeper. Well, actually, especially with the importance of puckouts distribution. That is a very fair point.
I'd argue that Nicky Quaid is more important as regards distribution of puckouts, but
yeah, Shane Wall, I'm from Limerick and I'll take TJ every day and 10 times on Sunday. He does not miss. And first words Shane spoke as a baby was Callan. Okay, right. Okay. Yeah, well, look, he went to the same school as me. Fine, I'm a few years older, but look, I like to see the lads who went to school in Burris doing well. Why wouldn't I? Kyle Hayes sneaks probably in 5th. Potential as well, reinventing the wing back position. That's true. He is.
Yeah, I think like
as is Calum Lyons, and Calum Lyons did it first.
Is
Calum Lyons in the top 10?
Not on what I've seen in this year's championship.
Yeah.
Like,
well, look at how Watford changed once he went into wing back against Clare.
Yeah, I know, but he has a massive upside, as they always say. But I just don't like. You're looking at what Hayes has done since being man of the match in the 2018 All-Ireland final as a centre forward. Lyons has only kind of come on the scene in the last 2 to 3 years. Had a brilliant season last year.
What have you got against Waterford?
I have absolutely nothing. Someone said that I got a comment the other day saying that someone from Waterford must have killed my goldfish or something like that. Far from it. But if we're going down the list a small bit, we're happy with our top 3. It's Kelly 1, Lynch 2, Reid 3. Like if you're looking at what we had left from the last day, we haven't talked about Seamus Callan 3, Dottie Burke 4, Sean Finn 5, Joe Canning 6. Keane Lynch has obviously gone up. Like where does Kyle Hayes come into the conversation here? I'd say.
Well, does he go ahead of Pádraig Mannion?
Oh, yeah, at the moment, yeah. You'd have to say he does,
So Pádraig Mannion is probably dropping out of this top 10, even though you and I have celebrated him as much as anybody.
Yeah, no, I think so, yeah. I think so.
Okay, so Mannion, unfortunately, maybe Cathal Mannion might be saying, where am I in this conversation? Does Patrick Horgan slip out of the top 10?
No, I don't think he slips out of the top 10 based on one game.
Do you want Seamus Callan out?
Of the top 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably do. Realistically, yeah, I do. Yeah.
From 3 to outside the top 10.
Yeah, they've played 2 games and he's been ineffective in both.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose a bit like Joe Canning one. I was thinking maybe that form will come back, and like he was good against Clare. Like I think he's done more in the 2 games, but he doesn't look like he's 100%. So he'll drop down the list here. I think Joe Canning. He'll
performance still stay in the top 10, so bad. But he'll drop down. I think he'll still stay in it just about.
I think Canning will do well to stay in the top 10 because his form last season and this year in the championship just hasn't been right. And last year was his worst ever game. Or last time out was his worst ever game. So, I mean, to tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, no. If I could still take, outside of the top 3, if I could still take a player, to hurl Offaly in the morning. To play, a big match or whatever, he'd still be very, very high on my list. If I could take a player for the next 10 years or the next 5 years, that's a different conversation. That's you want a Kyle Hayes or you want a Keane Lynch.
If you're taking me and Callan down, I'm bringing someone down with me. By the way, also, Aaron Gallan, look at the way he changed the game the last day when he came on.
Yeah, I can't have him in the top 10 conversation though, Shane.
Okay, who's number 4 then? What about Dahi Burke, Sean Finn?
Dahi Burke probably has to drop down 1 or 2, I'd say. I'd still keep him in the top 10, definitely, but I think he has to drop down 1 or 2. I think, like, I'd be happy as
Ozzy.
Ozzy. Ozzy comes far more into the top 10 debate now. He's done it when Waterford haven't been going well, so I've no issue there. We're just saying that Pádraig Mannion probably misses out, and Callanan will miss out. So there's 2 kind of spots open.
Okay, what about Sean Finn? Sean Finn and Dahi Burke were number 4 and 5 the last day. Dahi 4, Sean 5. So Sean Finn is still absolutely brilliant. Jack O'Connor got a few scores off him the last day, but I don't think he's necessarily dropping down that far. I think Ozzy is very high up here. Like, the lad does it whether he's in the forwards or the backs, and has been doing it since 2014.
I don't think he's very high up. I think he makes the top 10. I think
he's higher up than Kyle Hayes.
No, I disagree, Shane.
Get your comments in, people.
I disagree.
Sean Finn, number 4. I think he's looked more impressive than Dahi Burke has this season.
Yeah, no, it's kind of nearly a toss-up whether Hayes goes in at 4 and Sean Finn 5 or vice versa. I like the fact that we're lauding defenders as well.
Yeah,
the easy thing to do is put 10 free takers in here. Like,
yeah. I'm going with Sean Finn. He's just. Oh, then again, Kyle Hayes is so devastating. Do you know what? He wins games for you from wing back. The other lad makes sure you don't lose them.
Yeah.
But I think other people can do the marking jobs. Maybe not to his level. Yeah, okay. Kyle Hayes, number 4. Sensationally.
Yeah, I think Hayes is reinventing that position, I would say. Like, fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. You were mentioning about Callum Lyons, but like, Hayes is just doing it. Like, he's doing it so consistently now. He's only been playing wing back for a year. You know?
Oh, yeah. I know. I'm probably brilliant in pretty much every game. Okay, we'll
probably
go.
Going to be Limerick centre back going forward as well.
Yeah,
too, you know?
and actually we haven't mentioned Declan Hannon, but I don't think either of us necessarily have him in this, even though we both think he's brilliant.
No, and I thought he was caught for toe for the 2 goals the last day as well.
I love caught for toe.
Yeah, he's a brilliant player, obviously.
Austin Gleeson, would you put him ahead of Dahi Burke? I think Dahi Burke's brilliant and has been for a long time, but I'd be inclined to put, like, you know, where does Sean Finn, Ozzy Gleeson?
You're putting Hayes in 4, yeah?
I've Hayes in as 4, yeah.
Okay. Dahi Burke, Sean Finn. I can't have Ozzy ahead of either of those 2, being honest with you. Okay. Dahi Burke's a 5-time All-Star. He's the best. If he's not the best full-back in the game, he's the joint best full-back in the game. And then you have the best corner-back in the game. Ozzy is brilliant, but in many ways, his versatility might even hurt him here.
Yeah, but nobody else could do what he's doing, which is going wing back one day, unbelievable 4 points from play, full forward the next day, snapping balls, scoring points. I know they'd expect to beat Laois, but still.
Yeah, I still
brilliant last year.
I still yeah.
Yeah, Michael Verney's just dropped off there again. So just a reminder, the top 10 last year was, or a couple of weeks ago, was Tony Kelly, TJ, Seamus Callanan, Dahi Burke, Sean Finn, Joe Canning, Patrick Horgan, Keane Lynch, Pádraig Mannion was number 10. Go Grode Hegarty at number 9. Look, we can't leave him out either. Donald Farrell, keep TJ as long as you can. Owen Cody is the Prince of Ballyhale. Henry is surely King of Ballyhale, but TJ is God of Ballyhale. Let's not lose the head after 1 or 2 games, says the lads. Oh yeah, Callanan out. Where does you rank TJ in terms of Kilkenny greats? We'll have to come to that another day. It's another segment and on its own right. Ozzy has to be top 6. Ozzy has to be top 6, says Liam Ryan. Kudos to Alan Nolan. He's a good goalie. Kyle Hayes should be number 4, says Hughie Kennedy. We have gone with that. Rumour has it that Stapo got Callanan as a stamp tramp playing the way to beat us.
Oh, I love it. People are going to town. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Mark Horgan should have been taken off against Limerick Freeze that day. Dahi Burke 6th, Ozzy 7th. Talking about present time, Verney, Ozzy is ahead of Dahi Burke. Yeah, look, I would put Ozzy a little bit ahead. I just think Dahi is absolutely brilliant, but I'm just not kind of sure if he's quite at the level of last year. He might change it around, but I put Ozzy ahead. I put Sean Finn 5.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I put Ozzy 6.
I personally think he's too far up the list. I think he's done enough to be 8 or 9. I don't think he's done enough to be 6.
Okay, so then the options we have are...
Dahi Burke has a much better body of work over the last, since he really burst on that scene in, what are we talking about, 14, 15. He's a much better body of work than Ozzy.
Okay, let's go with Dahi Burke then at number 6. Number 7 then, are we looking at... I think Patrick Horgan might drop out of top 10 here, because I'm even looking at... Like, I'm looking at Ozzy, I'm looking at Owen O'Donnell, and I just don't see where Horgan... I think Horgan and Joe Canning are going to be under pressure, because Grode Hegarty's in here also.
Yeah, is there anybody else outside of that we're missing? Like, to me, as good as he is, don't think Lee Chin comes into the conversation.
Yeah, Liam Rush was mentioned too, but I think he's had a couple of good games, but I'm not quite sure he's in here.
He's not at this. He actually played really well the other day. When I looked at it again, but I don't think he comes into this conversation here. If you're John Collins says Tony Kelly number 1 and Ozzy has been top 5. Don't think Ozzy can come in from the cold. He's done enough to come into that. Someone said remember Callan being number 2. I do remember it. It was hard work to get him to make sure he wasn't number 2. There's a lot of guys that are going to have points to prove to us over the next couple of weeks, and I'm sure they will. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, Grode Hegarty, he's had a very poor first half against Tipperary, but he kind of imposed himself after that. Tom Morrissey, believe it or not, scored 5 from play. You wouldn't think it. Brilliant. Watch the back, he was brilliant.
And when they were going poorly, he was brilliant.
Yeah. So Austin Gleeson, I put in after Dahi here.
Yeah, that's Austin Gleeson at 6 or 7. 7. 7. Okay, so we've 3 left. Grode Hegarty has to come into that. I'd be happy with Owen O'Donnell being in the top 10. I definitely would.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of 8, 9, 10 here, I think some of the older players, I think if Callan's dropping out, I'd say there's no reason that Joe Canning and Patrick Horgan mightn't drop out either.
It's funny. 3 absolute all-time greats.
Without doubt.
All in poor form at the moment, and we, just not like how many of them will still be hurling inter-county in 2 to 3 years?
Arguably, maybe only 1, maybe none. I'm not 100% sure, but I think if Gleeson is 7, Grode Hegarty 8. Who else do we have? Owen O'Donnell 9, maybe.
Does Grode Hegarty deserve to be up a place? He was 9 the last time. Does he deserve to move up a place?
Well, the thing is, Austin Gleeson is coming out of nowhere into 7th, and
but he I'm just saying he's done a lot to deserve that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It is a fair point.
Has Patrick Horgan done enough in one game to deserve moving out of top 10?
Well, he was poor, and this is the thing. Some players have had 3 games this season. He's had 1.
Yeah, it's a difficult. It's a difficult one. I don't think we should be overly harsh. I don't think we should be overly harsh to probably Horgan and Canning in particular, because they've only played 1 game.
Yeah, but look, as Will says here, if you're taking Callan out based on his last 2 performances, then you should at least consider Liam Rush based on his. Pat O'Connor, come on lads, no way Seamus Flanagan near the top 10, top 50 maybe. So are you saying Canning, Horgan and Callan, are you saying all 3 go out, or are you making a case for one of them? Was Horgan, how good was Horgan last season?
Remember he got that great goal against Tip down in the Spills or Rain down in Limerick.
Very quiet otherwise. Like Callan was fairly quiet last year, did get that goal against Galway.
But let's call it we've been mad. The Canning was the quietest of them all, probably.
If you had one of those players, if you could have one of those players starting for you tomorrow out of the 3, I'd take Callan.
I'd take Canning.
Callan with his 37 championship goals, the other 2 lads from play, his are all from play. They can't come anywhere near him. They're probably about half that.
I'd still take Canning.
I'm taking Callan. So then we've got Tony, Keane Lynch, TJ, Kyle Hayes, Sean Finn, Dahi Burke, Austin Gleeson. Come on.
3 places left, yeah?
Yeah. Now, Chris Neville says still overlooking Donald Burke. I think he's really good, but
Donald Burke's a brilliant player. Yeah, he's a brilliant player, but as regards, coming up against some of the greatest of all time here,
Yeah, like we're about to do a power rankings, and I think we're going to have Tipperary number 2, and we're saying that there's nobody in the top 10 from Tipperary.
We're going to have Tipperary number 2 in the power rankings. We're definitely not.
Like Tipper clearly number 2 in the power rankings, and you're saying
number 2 in Munster, all right. Number 1 in our hearts.
Yeah. Look, right. Come on, we have to settle this. So,
okay,
where's Owen O'Donnell going in for you?
He's at 10.
10, okay.
Gerard Hegarty at 9.
Gerard Hegarty at 9. And then who's number 8? So
either Patrick Horgan, Seamus Callanan, who I don't think should be in the top 10 at the moment, or Joe Canning. For me, it's either Horgan or Canning.
Yeah, look, Horgan, very poor the last day. They were, yeah. Oh, this is so difficult. This is so difficult. By the sounds of your comments, you're now basing the ratings on current form. That's different from what you said at the beginning. I would have said it's everything. It's what you've seen before, what you've seen currently, how you think they do against each other's teams. Does Jason Ford get it? Maybe it's Jason Ford. Maybe it's Lee Chin. Maybe it's Rory O'Connor. Do you know what? I think it's Rory O'Connor.
No, he was very quiet the other day, Shane.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just
like he's a massive. Like you have to balance it off with current form, lads that are in brilliant form, and lads that have a massive upside, like Rory O'Connor, who could be playing for Wexford for the next 10 years, and then you have a Joe Canning, who is a massive body of work since we're going back to 08, and Seamus Callanan, something similar, Patrick Horgan, something similar. Like one of those should still be still need to be on the list.
Yeah.
Like we overlooked Owen O'Donnell last day, but we from the top 10. But we have said for a couple of years that he's one of, if not the best fullbacks in the country. So it's not, he was brilliant against Antrim. He was brilliant against Galway. He was obviously injured the last day, but like it's not, a wild leap to put him in at 10. It would be a massive leap to leave out Horgan, Canning, and Callanan. Particularly to me, it would be a massive leap to leave out Horgan or Canning.
Okay, well, look, I'll let you make the pick here. I don't agree with it. I think it should be Canning, but I'll let you make the pick.
I'll go Canning, yeah.
Okay, so that makes our top 10. Tony Kelly 1, Keane Lynch 2, TJ 3, Kyle Hayes 4, Sean Finn 5, 6 is Dahi Burke, 7 Gleeson, 8 Joe Canning, 9 Gerard Hegarty, and 10 Owen O'Donnell. So keep the comments coming in, let us know, and we'll be reviewing this again in another couple of weeks' time.
Number 1, Tony Kelly will be presented with this absolute beauty. Number 1, he'll be walking when they start back in Flannans in September, August. He'll be walking around with this bad boy on his shoulder.
Will you present it to him half-time of the Cork match on Saturday? Okay, we'll go into the power rankings now. The final thing before we finish up. This shouldn't take too long. Limerick are going to be at number 1.
Yeah,
without doubt. Number 2, you're thinking Kilkenny by dint of winning the Leinster title. I think Kilkenny would not be able to do what Tipperary did in that first half. I think Tipperary obviously have a tougher route back. And we will probably, like if Tipperary are going to get to an All-Ireland final, they'll have to play Kilkenny en route. And I think we'd find out there. Tipperary need to win one game and then we'll find out the answer. But I don't think Kilkenny are capable of playing at the level that Tip played at for one half.
Which team has beaten Limerick most recently in the championship?
Well, after we beat them in the Munster round robin in 2019, Kilkenny did beat them more recently. But Kilkenny, all right, if you're going to talk about recency bias, more recently.
No, I'm not talking about recency
bias.
No,
you're the one who brought it up. Who won more recently? You said more recently. Tip played Kilkenny in the All-Ireland. Who won that game, which was more recent than what you just
Tipperary won it. Who was the
and by how much? 14 points.
Who is the better chance of beating Limerick if they play? Tip, let's call a spade a spade.
Tip do.
Tip have a better chance of beating Limerick.
Yeah. Because what they did, they just need to look at it on the side and analyse, right, okay, we might have to look at it like rugby. After 40 minutes, we're going to make 3 or 4 changes here because we can't afford to be overrun. I think Tipperary can go and do that and do it better.
Okay, you're speaking hypothetically, and you'd love for them to go and do that. Kilkenny have gone and done it a couple of years ago. They beat a Limerick team that were in their pomp. Yeah,
but Cork have done really well against Limerick the last number of years. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to put them ahead of Tipperary here.
Back to back, like they're back to back Leinster champions as well.
But sure, Munster is way stronger than Leinster.
I don't necessarily agree.
Really?
Well, don't necessarily agree, no.
Which of the power rankings we've done recently have had just Munster with Kilkenny.
No, they haven't. Kilkenny were number 2 in their last power rankings, and Galway were number 4. 2 counties that play within the Leinster Championship. So that we had 1 and 3 in Munster, 2 and 4 in Leinster.
How have native Leinster teams done in All-Ireland finals? Right, 2016 lost by 9 points. Native Leinster team 2019 lost by 14 points. Otherwise, haven't made it there.
We're talking about native Leinster. We're talking about the Leinster Championship against the Munster Championship. Galway play in the Leinster Championship, whether you like it or not. You're giving out 1 minute. You're giving out that they're getting a handy passage to the All-Ireland semi-final. Now you're not calling them that they're basically not saying that they're in Leinster at all.
Well, look, Galway have it handy. That's all I know. Okay, right. So you're making a big play for Kilkenny to stay.
I know. I'm not making a big play. Tip were absolutely outstanding in the first half the other day. But
could Kilkenny play that hurling?
Like the power. I'll put it to you this way, Shane. The argument you're making is that Tip should be ahead of Kilkenny. Kilkenny are ahead of Tipperary in the championship already. There's a possibility that Tipperary will not get to the same stage that Kilkenny are at in the championship.
If they played tomorrow, who do you think would win? Exactly.
I think it'd be a very, very tight game. If they played tomorrow with Tip coming in after being beaten as they were in the second half the other day, I'd probably favour Kilkenny.
Okay, get your comments in out there. Let us know. I have Mike's in it here. Kilkenny number 1, Limerick 2, Galway 3.
Come on,
Come on, you're raving, Mike.
Pull the other one, Mike. There's no way Kilkenny are 1, and I'm a big Kilkenny fan.
Yeah, Tip may beat Kilkenny, but Kilkenny have better chance beating Limerick, according to Jack Nulty. Right, okay.
Who's a better chance of getting to an All-Ireland final? Like, Kilkenny have a very good chance of getting to an All-Ireland final now. You can say that's by being in Leinster, and that they only have to win a game to get there now. But that's just the way it is. Like, there's a fair chance that Tipperary will not be in an All-Ireland semi-final.
Okay, I think I'm going to have to accept defeat on this one. I shouldn't have had to accept defeat on Callan being outside the top 10 hurlers, but I might have to by dint of them being in an All-Ireland semi-final and having back-to-back Leinsters. So I will accept that. Right, so Limerick 1, Kilkenny 2. Who's number 3? Now, don't upset me here.
Yeah, it's difficult.
You not see the first half against Limerick.
I know, in fairness, and you can't write that off. And they're obviously our All-Ireland champions from 2019. By the way,
I think Limerick, if Limerick play against Kilkenny this year, I think they'll win by a minimum of 10 points.
Interesting. That remains to be seen. We'll have to actually see that. But Kilkenny have beaten Limerick far more recently in a meaningful championship game than Tipperary have. Number 3, I'm not changing our rankings too much. Like I Tipperary 3 the last day. Come on, Paddy, Offaly are not number 3. I'd love if they were. They might be in the future though. I would probably still have Tipperary. Number 3. They showed potentially, like in 2010 and like in 2019, Sheedy will realise exactly what he needs to do now to win an All-Ireland with this team, and that is mix the young with the old and make changes much quicker when the tide is turned against them. So I'm okay with Tip at number 3. Okay,
after that, you are looking at Galway, Cork, Clare, even Dublin. Dublin did well, even performed well in a Leinster final despite losing 4 players to COVID, and then 1 player after 3 minutes to injury, and Mark Shuta at half-time due to injury. Lost by 9 points. Kilkenny's bench came on, scored 6 from play and 1 a penalty, which was the difference really. So Dublin, to be that weekend, did very well. They deserve to be somewhere in the conversation.
They do, Shane, but I put it to you this way. This is power rankings for how we see the championship at the moment and how we see the championship going. There's an element of prediction in this as well. Like Dublin are under pressure now. They're probably going to be missing Owen O'Donnell, Cian O'Callaghan, Ronan Hayes, Oisin O'Rourke and Fergal Whiteley will all only return to training, at the very, very latter stages of the week leading. I can't even. There's a comment after
brilliant comment in. Yeah,
there's a comment after coming up from Mark Corcoran. Verney's top 10: 1 KK, 2 KK, 3 Offaly, 4 Michael Verney, 5 the Macho Man, and 6 Burr. Come on, Mark. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but from a Dublin point of view, I don't know. I think they're a bit of a dead duck in this championship at this stage. Just as a matter of O'Donnell injured, Shuta injured, starting cornerback coming back to training very, very late before their qualified All-Ireland quarter final. Ronan Hayes is going to be coming back to train, and 2 subs that are used in championship games. So like they're under pressure coming in. So to me, I think Clare deserve more kudos. We give them plenty of kudos, but I think we need to let our actions speak louder than words here. And I think they need to. I would have them ahead of Dublin in the power rankings.
Okay, I have Cork next in the power rankings for my money.
So you're going with Limerick 1, Kilkenny 2, Tip 3,
Cork 4.
Based on an 8-point beating against Limerick.
Trajectory. I can see them beating Clare here, and I can see them being a threat in the quarter final. Now, depending on how the draw works out, will they play? They could end up against Tipperary, and in recent years, Cork have always found ways to lose at Croke Park. But I know, just trajectory thing. I think Cork will beat Clare this weekend. So for that reason, they jump above Clare anyway. And you've already talked down Dublin. So then, who is it that you're fighting for? Is it Galway?
It's probably Galway at 4, being honest with you. Yeah, I am. They've done nothing to fall down the pecking order. We talked about potential COVID problems that they may have, but I don't think that's enough for them to fall. There's no way. Like, neither Cork or Galway have played a game since we last done the power rankings. There's no reason Cork should take a massive jump and Galway should take a massive fall. Yeah,
look, I'm just trying to sneak that in there because I do think Cork's trajectory is on the way up. But okay, I'll accept Galway for Cork 5. Like, you're looking at Waterford, Dublin. Waterford, Dublin, like obviously Wexford go down. Clare. Do you think Cork? It's basically down. Do you think Cork will beat Clare? And you've already said you think they will.
Yeah, I do think they'll beat Clare. Yeah, okay, I think Clare deserve to be next, though.
Even though Dublin will get farther, based on our prediction.
Oh, yeah. Clare have had a big championship win. In fairness, they've had a championship win against a team that was ranked lower than them in the power rankings. But
Dublin could get to an All-Ireland semi-final. If Clare win, Clare will be playing their 3rd week in a row against the Dublin team that obviously they'll only have players back from missing out on COVID. They'll have Owen O'Donnell out. But that'll be a 50-50 game, and maybe Clare will be a little bit zapped, and then Dublin could be an All-Ireland semi-final, and you're talking them down.
Don't see them being in an All-Ireland semi-final. I think they will be beaten in an All-Ireland quarter-final.
Okay, interesting. So, Cork, Clare 6?
Clare 6 for me, yeah.
Where are Waterford fitting in here?
Under poor form, misfiring at the moment.
So Dublin 7?
Yeah, Dublin 7. Yeah, I think
Dublin
Waterford
7. Waterford 8. Wexford 9.
Have a load of potential, but we haven't seen it yet this year. And I have no problem in saying I'd Waterford very, very high at number 3, and I think I bat for them for number 2, or batted for them even higher than Tip. I think I actually did. No, they ended up higher than Tip. They ended up very, very high, and they haven't franked any form from last year. I hope they can turn things around, but I think their championship is over at the weekend, realistically.
Yeah, Patrick Hickey. If Clare won the All-Ireland, Shane would still have them in 7th. Liam O'Callaghan, I'd probably have Galway still ahead of Cork. Will, if you're to rank kits, Dublin 1, Wexford 2, Galway 3, Clare 4, Tip 5, Kilkenny 6, Cork 7, Limerick 8. Paul Mooney, Clare have won 2 championship matches. Cork got whipped by Limerick. How are Cork ahead of Clare? Well, by virtue of the fact that both of us think Cork will win this weekend. Waterford ahead of Wexford, no chance. We drew with the Cats. Fair point, but then again, you'd like going 110 to 3 points down the last day. But then again, I suppose Waterford went well behind Clare. After this weekend, it could change, but I think...
Yeah, well, Waterford are still in the championship, Shane.
Yeah, and there's also just a feeling of negativity around Wexford at the moment that I don't feel there quite is with Waterford. Waterford ahead of Dublin, says Liam O'Callaghan. If Cork start playing those young gunslinging forwards in the blistering heat, they'd be a force. 3 of the Dublin lads who missed the final have now tested negative, so them lads will be back. No, I accept that, but it's just they won't be allowed back training until next week unless things change, as far as I know. O'Donnell, massive miss. No way Cork 4, maybe next year. Waterford would beat Dublin, give both your heads a shake.
I do think Waterford would beat Dublin. I do agree with that, but we're basing it on, like, Waterford have to win a game that me and you both think they won't win in order to get that chance. Okay, that's it. Limerick 1, Kilkenny 2, Tip 3, Galway 4, Cork 5,
6 is Clare, 7 Dublin, Waterford 8, Wexford 9, Laois 10 by dint of beating Antrim, who are going to get relegated to the Joe McDonagh Cup, so I don't think there's any debate on that one. So Verney trapped there because Kilkenny getting further was his reason for putting Kilkenny higher up than Tipperary. We've talked so much that I can't even remember what point that remains or it refers to, but no doubt you were caught out. That's it for the Hurling Show. If you want to get the audio podcast, go to patreon.com/OurGame. Great way of supporting the channel, £5 a month there. That's it from myself and Michael Verney. Enjoy the hurling weekend coming.
Tune in next week for when we rip our power rankings up and go a new one.
Yeah, right. Good luck.
Thanks, Shane.
The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10% off.